Okay. Looks like we're good to go. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Dib, by the way. So the first thing you'll notice is my angle is going to be a little off today. Don't worry, I'm working on that. What I did was, thanks to great people like Dib and a few other people that have been patrons to me and supported me through some financial means, I was able to get a new program where when I'm not at home and I'm doing these videos, now I could use my iPhone to do video and audio. So I'm hoping the quality is better than the live stream I did last night. That's my hope anyways. And so, because I don't have a proper tripod for it right now, I'm just kind of setting it on the printer. But I think it'll work out fine. You get to see my good side anyway, so it should be fine. But thanks for that, Dib. And I put some stuff on Patreon, a post up there for you as well if you want to check that out. But I do really appreciate it. I appreciate everyone that supports me. So, yeah, I did a live stream last night. For those of you that didn't catch it, check it out. It was working with a group of patriots and YouTubers. We're going to start trying to do group live streams every Monday. So look forward to that. And it's on my buddy Drone Tech's channel. You can check it out, and you can subscribe to all their channels too. I think they're all really good people and worth checking out. What I wanted to talk about tonight was, for you, for my great supporters, I did something unthinkable. I watched the Democratic debate sober. That's right. I watched it completely sober so that I could report it to you and my thoughts on it. So we'll start with that, and then we'll talk about some Bernie problems. You know, our favorite socialist, our favorite shirtless Soviet national anthem singer, and some things going down with him. And we'll have another installment of my now favorite segment where I get to brag about myself, which is my, I don't know what I'm calling it, like my time capsule segment, where I'll go back, something I wrote years ago and how it's relevant today. So I got a good one today involving Bernie on that. So let's talk about, first let's talk about the Democratic debate. So let me, all joking aside, let me be totally upfront and honest of my overarching thoughts on the debate. The first thing I want to say is, clearly I am biased. Clearly I'm someone who's a Trump supporter. I don't like any of these Democratic candidates. The only Democratic candidate still in the field that I even remotely like is Yang. I don't like a lot of Yang's policies, but I do think that he seems like a legit person, which to me is a lot of what running is about. He's spoken out why impeachment's stupid. He said that the Democrats have focused on Russia is why they lost the 2016 election, and that's a farce. So even if I don't agree with a lot of his policies, which I think are really wacky, hey, kudos to him as a person. He's the only one I like. And of course, probably just despite me, the Democrats decided to keep him off the debate stage. So all of the interesting people were gone, and it was just kind of bland nonsense as you would expect. But you know, I'm admitting my bias. I wasn't the target audience for this, and I wasn't the target audience for CNN, who was asking and moderating the questions, and I certainly wasn't the target audience for the Democrats that were on stage. So take from that what you will, and you're going to hear me grousing about the debate here for a while now, and I admit my bias. I fully admit it. So let's just get that out of the way. Now, as objective as I could be, I do think I wasn't very impressed with anyone. If I had to pick a winner, I think I would pick Klobuchar. I thought Elizabeth Warren came out strong, at least appealing to me. But once it got to the, because of my genitals, I'm special, we women's, we're the best, it just went off the rails for her there. And I'll get to why, even though I'm no Bernie fan, her attack on him, claiming that a woman can't win president, that he said that, is despicable and ridiculous. Yeah, good job, Dib. You're right. Hey, what's up, String Gunner? Thanks for being here. Firerock the same. Yeah, Dib, I sacrificed for you. I watched this for you. I could have been doing something better with my night, like clipping my toenails. But no! I watched the Democratic debate. So, yeah, I mean, there's some things Warren says at the beginning that I'm for. Like, she rails against a lot of these big corporations, which I agree with her in a lot of sense that these corporations have taken advantage. Now, I don't want massive government intervention. I think the problem is the exact opposite, and I'll get to more of this when I talk specifically about Bernie and Elizabeth and the problem with socialism. But in a nutshell, it's this. The problem is we do have these corporations that are able to lobby or otherwise influence government. Bernie and Elizabeth and the socialist plan is, well, we'll make the government bigger, that way it'll make these corporations obsolete. My interpretation is the exact opposite. The reason that these corporations are able to exert such influence and get such benefit is because the government intervenes in the first place. In other words, if there was no power from the government to declare winners and losers in business, there would be no need for lobbyists. The fact that lobbyists exist is because they know that government officials can be corrupt and can be corrupted, and therefore pick winners and losers that will end up benefiting them. So to solve that problem by making the government bigger seems to be a massive mistake, in my opinion. But I at least commend Warren for pointing out that this is a problem, more so than I thought other people were. But like I said, she started to get into this whole Bernie doesn't think a woman could win crap, which is clearly a lie, and she shows that she has no integrity. The problem with Elizabeth Warren isn't exactly what she says. There's a lot of what she says that isn't good, whether it be specific policies or just kind of her lies and things like that. But the real problem with her is she is the epitome of someone that will say whatever she can if she thinks it'll get her vote. So she probably, has pollsters saying this is exactly what position you should have. And if that changes next week, then she'll change her position. I mean, if you look at her writings from back like in the early 2000s, she basically sounds like a moderate conservative. She's thrown it, like, for example, she wrote a book about how the importance of family and how it's important to have, like, parents stay at home with children and things like that. Now, I'm totally against that. Wants the government to provide for healthcare so both parents have to go to work. She's totally changed who she is, and it's clear to me that she is the palpable corporate socialist. In other words, they saw the momentum Bernie Sanders had, and they said, we need someone that basically sounds like Bernie Sanders, but when push comes to shove, we know she'll listen to us. And that's exactly what Elizabeth Warren is. She'll lie. She's one of the most privileged people in the history of the world, and I'm not one that cares about that. Good for her. She was born into a good family. She happened to go to a good school. She's rich. Good for her, if she earned it. But whatever, regardless. Yet all she does is rail about how much of a victim she is. And she makes stuff up all the time. Oh, I got fired because I was pregnant. And tonight she was off on, I know if it wasn't for my Aunt B helping to raise my children, I would have never had the success I have. We know, Elizabeth, you're a victim. Oh, women, we have it so, we're the only one. Women's the only people that could win. Women are better than men. What does that have anything to do with anything? It's just total insanity. So, yeah, she fell off the tracks. Klobuchar said some good things. I thought Klobuchar's best moments, and again, by no means am I a supporter of Klobuchar or what I consider voting for, but I'm just trying to be as objective as possible. Klobuchar was right to call out both Bernie and Elizabeth, particularly when they were talking about healthcare, in that both their plans are a pipe dream. They're not concerned about the pragmatism of it. So, for example, one of the things Klobuchar was saying was, you're darn right, we should know where the money's going to come from to pay for Medicare for all like Bernie and Elizabeth want, and we should know how much it's going to cost. And if you don't tell us that, it's a pipe dream. That's very true. And I was talking to someone on Twitter who seemed like a nice gentleman. I hope he comes on here. He disagreed with me. He's a Medicare for all supporter. But he kept telling me the benefits of Medicare for all and how it was just the debate platform is why they weren't able to get into the specifics. But I said, well, then surely if all these specifics are out there and it's so well known that this will be such a boon for the country, you could show me where Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders have talked about how much it will cost. Oh, they just haven't got around to that. I joked around, we're going to be so busy getting all of our free stuff, free healthcare, free childcare, free college, free jobs, whatever they want. We won't have time to worry about how much it costs. We're just going to be grabbing free stuff left and right. Cost? Who has time for that? We're all getting free stuff, so we're all rich. What are you talking about, cost? Once we get the free stuff and we're all rich, then we'll be able to pay for things easily because we're rich. See how much sense that makes? Brilliant. It's brilliant. Bernie says spending trillions of dollars, that'll actually help the economy. He doesn't know how many trillions, but trust him, it'll help the economy. He assures us. Just like my New Year's resolution, which I tweeted out, which is, just like spending trillions will actually help us economically, my plan to lose weight is to eat more cookies. I figure the more cookies I eat, the more weight I'll lose. The Bernie Planner's weight loss plan, so we'll go with that. So, yeah, kudos to Klobuchar for actually calling it out. The other thing Klobuchar talked about, and this is important in politics, it's especially important for someone like me. I'm going to run for Congress again in 2022, and I'm not like Bernie in that I'm a socialist, but I'm an idealist to some extent, and I think that there are all kinds of problems in our government that needs massive sledgehammer taken to. Like, I would fully support totally eliminating the FBI at this point. They are so corrupt or inept, if you believe the Democrats, which is garbage. I say this all the time. According to the Democrats, the FBI leadership is so inept, they didn't know you weren't supposed to forge evidence to say the opposite of what it says. They just didn't know. They had no clue. That's how inept our FBI is. So, either they're corrupt or inept. I know they're corrupt, but let's go with the Democrats. They're inept. Fine, we have no need for them. Why should I trust an agency that doesn't know you're not supposed to forge evidence to keep me safe from terrorism, or to keep me safe from child sex predators, or to keep me safe from white-collar crime that could bankrupt me? I don't trust them, so I disband them. However, here's the part that Klobuchar brings up that's true, that would be a criticism of me. You're not a king when you're president, or if you're in the Senate or Congress. You don't get to make unilateral decisions, so you have to be pragmatic. Even if you think you have some sort of plan that would be a radical change that's good, you have to know how to get from point A to point B. And oftentimes, you can't just step in, kick down the door day one and say, this is how it's going to be. You have to be willing to somehow make your case to people that would otherwise disagree with you or kind of be on the fence about it. And Klobuchar is correct to point this out when it comes to Medicare for All. She says, look, there's not even Democrat support that this would ever pass the House or the Senate. Governors have come out against this. So we need to have some other sort of plan. And she's absolutely right to bring this up. But of course, Warren and Bernie just write this off. And Warren said it in one of the first debates. She said, if you think this is too radical, you don't deserve to be on the stage. Almost like they wear the fact that they know that this is an impossible plan with an impossible price tag. They wear that as a badge of honor. Yes, we're dreamers. I think they're listening to too much John Lennon. It's all well and good if you're running, a yoga studio. Not if you're running to be the leader of the country, though. So I'm not saying, I disagree with the Medicare for All. But fine, I don't mind them wanting that to be the ultimate goal. But lay out to us how you pragmatically get there if that's what you want to do. And Klobuchar, and this is speaking for the Democrats. If I'm a Democrat and I want to beat Trump, I'm like, look, I want a real plan. I don't want some, I don't want you to just come out and be like, oh yeah, and we'll have no prisons. There'll be no crime. Okay, how do we get to that step? We'll just say no crime. Okay, but that's a pipe dream. That's not a real plan. And that's how I feel about Bernie and Warren's Medicare plans. Now, let me criticize the Republicans here for a moment, because that's one of the things. If you're new to my channel, I got like a dozen people watching now. I had a lot of new subscribers for those of you that are regulars as a result of me doing that video last night. So I'm really happy with that. Though you people that were here earlier, you're still my favorites. But no, I appreciate everyone new that came along. So one of the things I try to do, I'm not ideologically driven where I won't criticize people that I support like Trump or Republicans or things like that. So one of the criticisms I have with Republicans, and I've told them this when I go to Republican meetings, I said, look, I think the Democrat healthcare plan is bad. I think these Medicare for All plans is bad. Some worse than others. But what's the Republican plan? Trump's repeatedly came out and said, I want to do something with healthcare. And McConnell and the rest that are leading the Republicans in Congress were like, no. We're winning on other issues. We don't want to deal with healthcare. Well, I'm sorry. I'm less concerned with kind of the gamesmanship of politics. I'd actually want things to be done in this country, and healthcare is a big problem. I personally know people that struggle with healthcare costs. I pay a lot for, my insurance, which I'm lucky to have good insurance. But, it's a real problem. And if I'm not personally afflicted by having someone that's struggling to pay medical bills to the point where they're like losing their house or anything. But if you were one of those people, that would be a big issue, and the Republicans should speak to that. So, I don't blame the Democrats. I think it's smart of the Democrats to focus on healthcare as a big issue. And they spent a lot of time talking about that tonight, which I think is strategically smart. But I'm not very impressed with any of their plans. Having said that, I'm no genius myself. I don't know what my healthcare plan would do. It would have to do with more of my theme of personal liberty and personal responsibility. For example, when I was running for Congress, one of the things that I looked into was a plan that basically told people that were at risk for diabetes, tough luck. Unless you made healthcare choices, the government wasn't going to take other people's tax dollars. And as a big fat guy myself, I totally understand. If I choose to sit around and eat donuts all day, should you be on the hook for me for my diabetes medication? No, because I could have made reasonable health choices that would have avoided that. Now, of course, some people, maybe you're disabled, crippled, that's different. But if you're able to make these choices and you don't, you just rely on other people to take care of you, that's ridiculous. It's not what this country's about. And a huge portion of healthcare expenditure in this country has to do with complications from diabetes and other obesity cases. And I'm saying this to you as a fat guy. So certainly this isn't to benefit me. I find myself all the time. I'm someone who's basically been poor my whole life, yet I have incredible student loan debt, yet I'm against all these policies to eliminate my debt and give me this money. So I'm trying to vote for what I think is good for the country, not what's just personally good for me. Let's check real quick. Yeah, they don't know how they're going to pay for their programs whatsoever. And this is a recurring problem, you see. One of the problems, and it's actually a double-edged sword because it's a huge benefit to the Democratic Party, to the establishment in general. Not just the Democrats. It could also be the deep state, the establishment, which, we've seen the John McCain's, Jeff Flakes, the Mitt Romneys. There are definitely people in the Republican Party that fit into this as well. They don't want to talk about logic. They make appeals to emotion. You see this all the time. And the problem is when you make those appeals to emotion as your go-to thing, it means that you aren't really looking at facts that often. And so oftentimes what happens is you kind of have this purity test where it's like, oh, if you don't agree with me, you're immoral. But then we never get to the facts of like, but wait a minute. How does your plan actually help the people you say it's going to help? So, for example, we could talk about free everything for the poor until we're blue in the face. But we need to ask ourselves, is that what's really best to help solve poverty? That's the end game, right? We want less poor people. We want less people in poverty. So if I have theoretically a different plan that I think will get there that doesn't involve just handing out free goodies, why does that make me less moral? You might say I'm wrong. You might say I'm ignorant of the facts if you disagree with me, but that's not a question of my morality. And so what ends up happening is you have all these plans that are just based on feels. And so you have Elizabeth and Bernie that are challenging themselves to see who could have the most fairy tale plan. Free healthcare, open borders, free childcare, free college, free jobs for everyone. And you don't believe me. You think that this sounds ridiculous. Go read the Green New Deal. Remember what it originally said in the footnote, or that they had to take out? They acted like it wasn't a big deal. Free jobs for even people that just don't feel like working. I mean, free money. Free money for people that just don't feel like working. Not because you're disabled, not because you're unable to get a job. You just don't feel like it. Total control. They don't want you to have home ownership in the Green New Deal. They want total takeover of the energy sector. That would be almost total takeover of the economy. They're going to retrofit every building in the country. They're going to give money based on your race, reparations, based on your sex, based on your geographic location, etc. This stuff can't happen. They talked about eliminating fossil fuels in 10 years. Their plan was literally to go to every building in the United States and refit it so that it could exist. The infrastructure, the new infrastructure they would build would be able to provide energy to all these retrofitted buildings. In my small rural town in Pennsylvania alone, it would be millions of dollars to retrofit all these buildings. Just in one small town in rural Pennsylvania. This is a pipe dream. It would cost hundreds of trillions of dollars. They don't care. They talk about it like you're immoral if you don't believe this. They wear as a badge of honor how impractical their plan is. Well, the more imaginary money I want to spend, the more pure I am, the more moral I am. And if you bring facts into this discussion, you're an immoral, crappy person. That's what the debate was about today. So, they didn't talk about immigration again because that's a loser for the Dems, and CNN knows, right? We're not going to talk about the open borders policy all these people have. And yes, I know that my Democrat friends will challenge me and they'll say, they didn't say open borders. No, what they said was that illegally coming here shouldn't be a crime. It should be a civil offense. And we won't send people back for illegally coming here. And we won't detain them. That's open borders. If you allow people to come, that's not a crime for coming here illegally, and you refuse to detain them, then you have an open border. Anyone who walks across the border is allowed to stay, and we're not allowed to detain them. That's what almost every one of these people have been for. Also for healthcare for the illegals. Now, that's one of the things we could talk about specifically with healthcare, but again, the gentleman I was discussing this with on Twitter, by the way, even though we disagreed, seemed like a nice person, one of the talking points that he says, I guess not fair to call talking points, maybe he truly believes this, and he has some facts to back it up, is there are plenty of other countries that have like a Medicare for all type plan or universal health care. But those countries also have far greater border restrictions. We have no idea. There could be upwards of 27 million illegals in this country by some estimates. If we're going to give free healthcare, free college, and free childcare to all of them, how many more do you think would come? Especially if we're not detaining people at the border and it's no longer a crime to come across. How much more money do you think we'll spend than the average country? Even Canada, the progressive utopia, has said that they're getting too many immigrants. They need to restrict the amount of people who can come. They're just being overflooded. So why would we be expected to have the situation be any different here? I have no problem if people decide to vote for a Medicare for all type plan, but all I want is just some honesty of how much it'll cost. And oftentimes what we see, just like with Obamacare, is they have to lie to you to get you to vote for it because they assume they know better than you. So they have to say, sure, if you like your doctor, you can keep it. When they know that was a lie. But they had to lie to get you to vote for it because they know better than you. Well, I'm sorry, that's garbage. I'm not buying that crap. If it was such a good plan, you wouldn't have to lie to us. Just be honest. If you're right that your plan will save money, you say, yes, you're going to pay more. You're going to pay more up front in your taxes. You know, many of the countries they talk about with this universal health care have upwards of 50% income taxes paid. Leave the American people to decide. Do you want half of your paycheck right out of the gate to go to health care? If so, vote for these plans. I'm not saying, I do think it's wrong, but that's fine. You could make that judgment reasonably. It depends on where you're at with how you're paying for health care now. I think that anytime the government gets involved in these big programs, it becomes a disaster. And people will say, well, what about Social Security? What about it? It's bankrupt. I'm 35. I'll never see a dime. It's just more taxes on the poor and more taxes on the young. That's what all deficit spending is. And don't get me wrong, Trump deserves to be criticized for his massive deficit spending as well. But let's not kid ourselves. These Democrats that are suggesting all this free stuff and open borders would massively explode the deficit, far worse than Trump's doing. But by all means, we should. If you were in the Tea Party, if you were mad about Obama's deficit spending, you should be mad about Trump's as well. You shouldn't just say, well, I like what he's spending on, so it's okay. No, I disagree. So I do criticize Trump for that. Let me check out some of the posts here. What's up, Clearly Clever? Thanks for joining. Econ says, Fortune 500 companies pay on average $15K per employee for healthcare. What happens to that $15K if we have Medicare for all funded by new income tax? Well, right, it would be a boon to those companies that are currently paying for healthcare for their employees. It certainly would. It would be advantageous to them because it would come directly out of your check. And it would be, for example, there are a lot of people right now that are in low-paying jobs but are there because they have good healthcare benefits. I personally know a lot in my family that are in a situation like that. This is particularly true of older people. They'll take a job that maybe only pays $10, $12 an hour, but it's got good benefits. Those people stand to lose hugely because even though they'll get the healthcare, their job will be worthless, so they'll quit the job. Then who fills that job? The company won't be able to afford to pay more. I guess they'd be able to afford to pay slightly more because they're not paying for the healthcare. But you see, there's all kinds of complications. And to just say, oh, no, it'll all work out. Trust me, show me one time in history that we've had a massive government program that went that smoothly. Remember even Obamacare? They couldn't even get the rollout properly. So all I'm asking is for some honesty. Stop acting like, it's just that simple. Wave the magic wand. Don't worry about cost. The rich people will pay for it. Your bills are going to go down. Trust us. It'll be totally smooth. What about Obamacare? You made all those lies like if you like your doctor, you can keep it. What about that? Oh! And remember, there was a video I found of Bernie, I believe in the late 80s, saying Medicare for all would bankrupt the country. Now, I understand the Bernie defense to his claim. Things have changed. That Medicare for all he was talking about is different than his Medicare for all. But clearly, if Bernie thought that in the late 80s, he could see how people would have questions today. So for him to smugly refuse to discuss how much things will cost and just say, it'll be cheaper, you'll pay less money, what we can't afford is to not do it, when he himself thought similar plans in the late 80s would bankrupt the United States, shows that he's being disingenuous. And they're disingenuous all over the place. Oh, no problem, SJG. Thanks for being here, and thanks for moderating the other day. Mayor Pete's the only one who can string together a sentence, says Clearly Clever. Yeah, Mayor Pete, although I don't like a lot of what he says, let's not mince words. He's a good public speaker. He is. That's something that Obama had going for him, and that propelled Obama very far. There was very little substance with Obama. He was just kind of a point man in the suit that was willing to listen to what the establishment told him. But he was eloquent, at least when he was on teleprompter, and Mayor Pete has some of that. I don't think he has the charisma or the coalition building that Obama had, but he's certainly a gifted speaker. I mean, that's definitely true. Yeah, I'm that, and that's a good counterpoint that I don't understand why healthcare goes through employment in the first place. It seems to make little sense. Shouldn't it be up to us as individuals? Why is it up to employers in the first place? I don't get it. Why should, if I change jobs, I lose my healthcare. I have to go with total new healthcare. But it's not like that in anything else in life. Like if I change jobs, I don't have to get new car insurance. I don't have to get new homeowners insurance. So why is it different with healthcare? It's weird that we have this crazy system that goes through employers. The reality is this is an idealistic, like, Medicare for all type pipe dream, but the reality is we should just get insurance out of the equation altogether. There are doctors that just accept cash payments, and the cost to go to those doctors is extremely low. Because once you cut out the middleman of insurance, the costs go to you're just paying a doctor for his services or her services. Sorry, Elizabeth. But, then that's a matter of personal responsibility. You have to save up. You don't have, you have to have a health fund, put money in a bank and things like that. What happens if you don't? So there probably does need to be some sort of social safety net. And the people, here's the other thing, the people we've promised Medicare and Medicaid and things like that, and that's one of the things Obamacare did. It gave a bunch of people insurance that didn't have it, regardless if you think that's right or wrong. The problem is, once that occurs, if you decide, oh, this isn't working out, we want to change it, it's near impossible to tell those people you promised, hey, we're going to pay for your health care. Oh, sorry, we can't do it now. It's the same problem we're having with pensions that are bankrupting all these cities. These cities promised the garbage man they were going to make $150,000 a year when they retired. So the garbage men worked this job under that promise. Now the cities don't have the money to pay these garbage men. And garbage man's just an example. Any city worker, right? So what do? On one hand, you're like, look, pragmatically, you can't keep paying these pensions out. The city's going to go bankrupt. But on the other hand, who's going to look at the garbage man that worked 30, 40 years and say, sorry, the money you were promised you don't get now? It's the same with Medicaid, Medicare for all. The people that Obamacare gave the health care to, it's hard to say, okay, this didn't work out. We need to go in a different direction. So that's why we should be so skeptical of a program like Medicare for all. Because once you promise that to everyone, again, massive, what's the old cliche? You could vote your way into socialism, but you have to shoot your way out of it. And there's truth to that. It's near impossible to bring yourself back from these government programs. That's why we should be extremely skeptical anytime we're giving the government massive power. The same thing could be, before I be picked on for just criticizing the left, you could say the same thing about things like the Patriot Act. I say this all the time. Once we gave the government the power to take away our Fourth Amendment rights, we are going to have a hell of a time ever getting that Fourth Amendment protection back, our rights back. Think it through in your head. Why? Let's say we pass the Patriot Act. Then hypothetically, we'll go Schrodinger's Patriot Act. We pass the Patriot Act. Then let's say hypothetically in the next 10 years, no terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Do you think the government will say, fair enough, we no longer need the Patriot Act, so we'll scrap it now? No, they'd say, see, the Patriot Act protected us. We need to keep it going. Now, let's take the opposite tack. Let's say we pass the Patriot Act in 10 years, terrorist attacks go through the roof. You think the government's going to say, oh, well, the Patriot Act didn't work, so we'll get rid of it? Of course not. They'll say, we need more intrusive measures into your rights to privacy. It's like that with every government program. What made the United States special was we were the first country that focused on individual liberty and the importance of the individual as opposed to, some king or monarchy or some collective. It wasn't classes, it was you as the individual. From the sweat of your brow, you were basically able to do whatever you wanted within reason as long as it didn't harm another individual. That's what made this country great, that focus on the individual. When we start relying on the government to say, oh, you can't take care of yourself, we have to do it for you, it strips that personal responsibility and it leads us down a path that'll be difficult to recover from. And we get there more and more every year. So yeah, anything else in the debate? Let me go through. I made some notes. I was on this website, Above Top Secret. So I'll just go through some of the things I was posting. I was posting a lot on Twitter as well. So if you want, if you check, by the way, just a brief intermission here. If you check the description of this live stream and most of my other videos, it's got how you can support me on PayPal, how you can support me on Patreon, how you can follow me on Twitter, and how you can follow me on BitChute. So just a little plug there if you want to support me any of those ways. But yeah, one of the things I did was I was on Above Top Secret, the site I'm on, and I was posting. If you want to follow what I had to say on Twitter, the link's there in the description. So the first thing I put was Bernie starts off saying he is against wars. But this is a problem for Bernie, and this is one of the things that upsets me is the hypocrisy of it all. If you follow my channel, that's a running theme. For example, I've said since the get-go, if Donald Trump or people connected to him committed crimes, they should be held accountable for them. Charge them with crimes, that's fine. All I want is equal application of the law. And every single time we see that Trump or anyone connected to him is accused or charged with a crime, we have evidence of the intel agents or the Democrats doing the exact same crime, often more blatantly or in a worse fashion. Go ahead, take your pick. FARA violations. Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, didn't register as a foreign lobbyist. He sits in solitary confinement. Oh, what's that? He did that crime while working with the Podesta group that was founded by Clinton's campaign manager? Oh, so surely the Podesta group also suffered a similar fate. Oh no, they were allowed to get off the hook with just signing some paperwork retroactively. Or how about lying to the FBI? Oh, Flynn, which thank God he withdrew his guilty plea, which is something I'll be doing videos on, but that's great news. Flynn, who didn't even lie, I was one of the first people that actually went through the 302 on my channel to show even the government's 302, the FBI's 302, proved that Flynn never lied. But he was charged for lying to the FBI. Meanwhile, we have all these people that lied to the FBI that we can see just from the IG reports. We know that Mills and Aberdeen lied to the FBI when they said they had no knowledge of Hillary Clinton's server until after her tenure as Secretary of State. But there have been publicly released emails showing them talking about it as early as 2009. We know that FBI agents said that it defined credulity that Hillary Clinton thought that the C at the top of documents didn't stand for confidential or classified, but was alphabetical order. Do you know what defined credulity means? She lied. None of them were charged. It's over and over again. So again, we see that constant theme where the Democrats accuse the establishment ones, not your neighbor, not my friend that's a Democrat that's maybe watching this, but the established ones that are running the party, those in the mainstream media, those in academia, all the movers and shakers that are in charge of things with the establishment Democratic Party, what they accuse you of is what they're actually doing. So let's start here. Bernie says he's against the wars, but remember, he was the guy who said that the worst foreign policy decision Trump made was suggesting pulling out of Syria. Now, think about that. This is a guy who's made his bones. He said, for years, he said, how are you going to pay for that? We spend too much on foreign regime change wars or disastrous foreign policy. If we stopped spending money on that, we would have money for all of my grand and magical plans. Right? That's Bernie Sanders. Well, the first time he has the chance to put his money where his mouth is, right? And actually say, okay, I don't like Trump. I think he's a bad dude for XYZ, but he's right to want to pull out of Syria. Now let's see if he actually does it. Or he's right to want to pull out of Afghanistan. Let's see if he actually does it. Instead, Bernie says it was the biggest foreign policy mistake Trump's made. Not bombing Syria, right? That wasn't what Bernie said. Bernie didn't speak up so loud then, did he? Because the Democrats were on board bombing Syria. The only time the New York Times, MSNBC, or the Democrats suggested that Trump was presidential was when he was bombing Syria, which I thought was a low point in his presidency, and I criticized him for. But all of a sudden, the man of peace, Bernie Sanders, who's going to rail right off the gate in this debate about the disastrous wars. He's been against the wars. What about Syria? What about Trump pulling out of Syria? You said, no, we can't leave the Kurds there. So when we finally get a chance to pull out, he goes with the same neocon talking points that supposedly he's against. By the way, the intel agencies that are always encouraging these wars, the military-industrial complex that he seems to rail against, yeah, those are the same people that were kind of leading a coup against Trump with the whole fake Russiagate stuff, and Bernie was more than happy to support that too as well. So, sorry, I don't buy your anti-war stance. Once more, like always, just like in 2016, you showed that you're a hypocrite. As soon as you had the chance to get a second lake house to gracefully bow out when Hillary Clinton cheated you, that's exactly what you did. You think anyone who makes one dime more than you is a terrible, immoral person. But it's okay for you to be a millionaire and never really have done any real work. So yeah, he's only anti-war when it benefits him politically. Good job, Bernie. Let's go to Biden next. He admits he was wrong to vote for the Iraq War, but then he says, yeah, I'm sorry I voted for the Iraq War, but Obama thought I was a good guy. That's all Biden ever said. Like, it's so pathetic. I remember watching, oh man, I'm going to butcher this story, but there used to be this like celebrity rehab show with Dr. Drew, and there was a guy that was in Alice in Chains, and I just remember watching it with my wife and laughing the whole time because he'd be like, yeah, Lane Staley from Alice, I knew Lane Staley. Every story was like, oh, me and Lane, when Lane and I used to party, it's like, yeah, we did it. You knew Lane Staley. Good for you. That's how Biden is. Well, me and Obama. I don't know if you heard of Barack Obama. He's kind of my boy. Of course, he won't come out and publicly endorse him. But, me and Obama. It's pathetic. Okay, Bernie then is pointed out by, and let me take this moment to say, some of the moderators did ask reasonable questions, though they did do one of the shadiest things I've ever seen, which I'll get to when we get there. But they ask difficult questions. So one of the things they do is they point out to Bernie, look, you criticize the Iraq war and you say you voted against it, but you voted for the Afghanistan war. And Bernie somehow said, I would like to pick Bernie's brain why he thinks that that's okay. He thinks the Afghanistan war was legit, but not the Iraq war. And he deflects. He says, the most costly foreign policy decisions was Vietnam and Iraq. And he talks about lives lost and money spent. What about Afghanistan? Those soldiers don't matter? Now, of course, I don't think that's what Bernie's saying here. But it seems awfully selective. The war he voted against was a disaster. The war he voted for, that was okay. And which war are we still in? Oh, that's right, it's Afghanistan. So I'd like to hear the nuanced description of why Bernie thinks that the Afghanistan war, and maybe there is one, maybe he has an explanation, but I would like to hear it, and it was a shame he wasn't pressed on it. Because for someone who says, we're lied into all these wars, the one war he voted for, all of a sudden, he doesn't think that was a lie. He thinks that was legitimate to vote for. He could have just said, I made a mistake. But he won't do that, because one of the big things he's running on is Biden shouldn't be voted, anyone who voted for the Iraq war shouldn't be trusted. So he can't say, mistakes happen. I too had a mistake. So I thought that was a little hypocritical. Let me check the chat real quick. Thanks, John. I'm not the best impression person, but I try. Blase, nice to see you. That is one of Trump's... I don't know if you'd call this a skill, but probably the greatest tool that Trump has in the toolbox is he has the good fortune of going against possibly the most politically inept people in existence in the modern Democrat Party. Anytime they have a legitimate thing that they could criticize Trump for, they shoot themselves in the foot. Like, here's the easiest example I can think of. I remember one time Trump was was clearly watching one of the Fox News shows, and he tweeted out that night, shame about this terrorist attack in Sweden. Only problem was there was no terror attack in Sweden. What it was a guest they had on that was talking about how attacks and bad things are increasing in Sweden, but not that there was an attack that day. So the Democrats could have came out and said, look, there wasn't an attack today. Stop getting your talking points from Fox News. This is ridiculous. But instead they came out and said, there was no attack. Stop listening to Fox News. And by the way, there were never attacks in Sweden. It's a great place. And then it was like, well, no, that's actually wrong. Trump was wrong on the specific, but he's right on the generality of it and the thrust of what was being said. And that is, with a lot of these refugees came a lot of crime, a lot of terrorism, a lot of sexual assaults, etc. Grenade attacks in Sweden now. But that's just a classic example of what the Democrats do. They have a small victory, but their hubris leaves them try to blow it up, and they end up making a mockery of themselves over and over again. That's Trump's greatest gift. Let's see. Yeah, clearly clever. You saw that? That was funny, yeah. Poor Mike Starr, right? Every story, Lane Staley. Yeah, and Dib, I totally agree with you. They are ignoring rural America. I mean, it's evident. Let me keep going with what I'm going, but trust me, I'll get back to that. And so, moving on. The next thing I said was, Mayor Pete speaks well, I'll give him that. But he really isn't saying anything. The first time he got to speak, he was just like, we're going to face a lot of challenges. But the question was like, why are you the leader to face these challenges? So just saying, there's a lot of problems. It's like, okay, he didn't really say how he would solve them. But he does speak well, I'll give him that. Then Warren speaks, and this is what I said about it. I said, I like what Warren is saying about stopping the revolving door from defense industry. She's absolutely right. A lot of these regime change wars are from people that are revolving from being lobbyists for the defense industry and the military-industrial complex. Then they become cabinet members or they become Congress people. Then they go back to lobbying or back to working for these groups, and that is a problem. I do think Warren's right that there are disastrous foreign regime change wars. But it's funny, they selectively complain about them. I didn't hear many complaints from Warren when Obama was waging them. Didn't hear many complaints when Hillary was saying, we came, we saw, he died. By the way, you want to talk about how heartless Trump is. Do you remember what the context of Hillary saying that was? After we supported a coup in Libya, Obama supported this coup, right? Based on lies. Gaddafi was telling us all the time, was talking to media, these aren't rebels. These aren't people from my country of Libya. These are outside Islamic extremist groups that are being armed by the United States and other Western nations. And he was right, because we see predictably what happened to our embassy in Benghazi. Now Libya is way worse than it ever was, because we had to have a foreign regime change war so that a bunch of politicians and military-industrial complex people and establishment people could get incredibly wealthy with crazy kickbacks we're sending, with weapons that were sent there that were paid for by taxpayer dollars, etc. Funny, Elizabeth Warren didn't speak up much about that, neither did Bernie. But But trust them, they're for peace, right? But I do agree with what she's saying here. I say, unfortunately, I don't trust her character at all. She's totally supported the intel agency coup against Trump with Russiagate. And make no mistake about it, the groundwork for a lot of these wars is laid, it started with the intel communities. That's one of the things I think a lot of Trump supporters are upset with me about. I don't know what to think specifically about Trump's attack on Soleimani, killing Soleimani. No doubt Soleimani was a bad guy. Sorry, that's not enough for me to say that he should be killed by the U.S. military. I could point to hundreds of bad guys in countries, in leadership roles in countries that we actively do business with. So to just say, well, he was bad, so he deserved to die. Maybe, but then what about all the people in Saudi Arabia? What about people in China? Etc., right? Now, I know our embassy was attacked. I know that warranted some sort of response. I criticized Trump right out of the gate for bombing Syria. I did not do it for the situation in Iran because it's so complicated. I don't know what the right move was. Trump was right to respond. Did he go too far? I don't know. Time will tell. But the people that are taking Iran's side are ridiculous. Going so far as to blame Trump for them shooting down an airliner. Disgusting, anti-American people that are social justice warriors, cultural Marxists that think they separate everything in life into oppressor versus oppressed. They think the U.S. is the great Satan, the oppressor. Therefore, Iran must be a great place. Even though, they treat women terribly, they throw gays off buildings, they oppress their people. Doesn't matter, we could overlook all that because they're enemies with the U.S., therefore they must be good. So says many of the social justice Democrats. Then you got a big section of them that are just like, Trump's bad, so anyone against Trump must be good. It's kind of just a more shallow version of the same thing. So, but still, I think reasonable people could have questions about whether or not that attack was good. But here's where my criticism comes from. I don't trust the intel agencies, period. At all. I don't trust them in their coup against Trump. I don't trust them when they say that it was Russia that hacked the DNC server. So I'm not going to take their word when they say, oh, by the way, and we should bomb these people. Sorry. Not doing it. I'm just not. Elizabeth Warren supported these intel people that we know are warmongers. She supported them wholeheartedly, as did Bernie, as did Buttigieg, as did Klobuchar, as did Steyer. Am I missing any of them? I feel like I'm missing one. Whatever, must not be important. They all supported the intel agency in their coup against Trump, but we're supposed to just ignore that. In fact, they not only supported the intel agencies, they said to question them was un-American, was jeopardizing sources and methods. They assured us they would never behave in a corrupt manner, even though we now know they did. Yet then they want to criticize, the conflicts that they speak for. Do you understand the contradictions? They'll criticize the intel agency, rightfully, I think, when it comes to them always wanting these regime change wars. But when it came to the coup against Trump, how dare you question them, Trump supporter? All right, moving on, or I'll be here all night. Skip that. Biden says, this is incredible. This is one of the... I actually laughed when I heard this. Biden says the way to deal with Iran and stop them from getting a nuclear weapon is to apply pressure on them like Obama did. I don't know about you, but if someone flew me like $150 billion of cash in pallets in the middle of the night, I wouldn't consider that them putting pressure on me. I'd say, thanks, buddy. That's Biden's definition of applying pressure to a hostile country? Doing what Obama did and sending them all this money? Okay, dude. All right, this is another good one. Mayor Pete, and this is what I wrote, Mayor Pete is shocked, I tell you, that Trump isn't pulling troops out of the Middle East. But this is after his party pushed Trump over and over and over again not to pull troops out of any country. Remember the whole foaming at the mouth about pulling out of Afghanistan? Remember foaming at the mouth about pulling out of Syria? That's his party. Mayor Pete didn't speak out against that. So I love this Democrat double bind they got Trump in. On one hand, he's a warmonger, he won't pull out. But then as soon as he tried, look at Bernie, as soon as he's like, maybe we'll pull troops out of Syria, Bernie's like, no, you can't pull troops out of Syria. All the Democrats go insane. You can't come out of Afghanistan. You can't come out of Syria. ISIS will come back. Al-Qaeda will come back. And then they get up on stage and like, can you believe Trump's not pulling troops out? That's your party, dude. That's what your party's been forcing him to a confrontation with Russia for 3 years. And then you have the nerve to bring up McCarthy, as I'll get to later in the debate. Which party's the party of Russians everywhere? Everyone's a Russian spy? That's the Democrats. Yet they accuse Trump of McCarthyism. So, yeah, I guess, very strange, Pete. Yeah, that's strange. Trump did exactly what my party wanted and didn't pull troops out. I'm going to criticize him for that. What a joke. Biden says Trump's bad because he didn't get Congress's approval to strike Soleimani. Yet he admits it was perfectly fine when Obama over and over did. He said that there was, what's the word he put? There was a congressional authority to do so, or I can't remember the exact word he uses. No, there wasn't. Show me that authority on Libya. I don't see it. This is just another example of this constantly. The Democrat, you could do the exact same thing the Democrats do. Democrats issue a quid pro quo to get a prosecutor fired that's looking into Biden's son. Perfectly fine. Trump wants a quid pro quo to look into that corruption. Impeachment. Obama wants to bomb people, even a U.S. citizen, without congressional approval. No problem. Trump wants to go after a really bad guy, Soleimani. Impeachment. This is terrible. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The double standards are obvious. Steyer, true to form, turns a question about the Middle East into, drumroll please, climate change. I can't remember the exact phraseology that Steyer used, but it was, let me see if I can get it down. It was something like this. It was like, yeah, the Middle East, I've heard of that place. Did you hear there's fires in Australia? Climate change. Good point, Tom Steyer. Way to be. Because nothing says presidential ready like making everything about one issue that's totally unrelated to the thing we're talking about. Ringcat, I'll get to that. We can talk about Alex Jones at some point. I think he's overzealous and he's like plays a character more than he does, but I think his heart's in the right place. And weirdly enough, a lot of the stuff he talked about ended up being true. He's realized that not everything's a conspiracy. A lot of what he talked about was right, and there was, quote, conspiracies. But, you know, I think even he now admits that since he's been the target of conspiracies, that it's not the greatest thing. By the way, he's far less of a conspiracy theorist than the average mainstream media journalist that pushed Russian propaganda and intel agency propaganda against Trump for 3 years. In 2000, there were only 7 countries in Central Bank. Yeah, I mean, John, remember, Gaddafi's great sin was he suggested an African dinar. He wanted an African currency to go against the petrodollar, right? That's what that was about. And one of the first things the rebels that we were arming declared in their manifesto or whatever, their list of demands, whatever you want to call it, was that we continue to go back to, that Libya go back to being backed by the Federal Reserve in the United States. I don't know about you, but if I was a starving farmer, I wouldn't really give a shit about being backed by a federal bank in the United States. I'd care about like food and my family being safe and things like that. Not these people! Isn't that odd? I wonder where they got all those weapons to overthrow Gaddafi. Oh, real quick, I didn't finish this point. So yeah, once we saw, he died, the Hillary thing. Remember, Trump's a monster for what he did. So the context is, we helped overthrow Gaddafi with these violent Islamic terrorists. You know how they killed him? They paraded him through the street while they sodomized him with a bayonet. Well, he's still alive, on the end of a bayonet. That's something to laugh about by Hillary Clinton, though. You did it. But Trump's the warmonger. The Democrats were really cool with that. They were cool with that. But bombing Soleimani, that was terrible. I guess if Trump would have just, paid some Islamic terrorists to sodomize him with a bayonet and parade him around the street, then it would have been cool to the Democrats. Yeah, and you're right, Evil Smile. A lot of what Alex Jones said was true. Now, we can talk about the specifics. It's not everything, but... one of the things I love was, and you can't really just blame the candidates for this, because these debate, the format of them are so terrible. It's so overgeneralized you don't get to specifics. But I love the fact that basically every candidate was like, how are you going to solve the problems with Iran or North Korea or blah, 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 insert country, or how are you going to solve climate change, etc., anything like that. And the answer was always, we need to build coalitions with our allies. Okay. What does that solve? Did we have coalitions with our allies when the Iraq war happened that you were all against? Seems we did. Didn't work, according to all of you, right? How about Afghanistan? Seems we did. Didn't work. How about North Korea? Has anything been solved there? For decades, that problem's been going on. We had a coalition of allies before Trump. Didn't work. But now, magically, it'll all work. It'll solve, just coalition allies. It'll solve everything. Now, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. And this is the double standard that you see with a lot of these Democrats. I did a debate with a YouTuber, Destiny. He's like a left-wing debater, Twitch streamer. And this was one of the issues he brought up. This is just mind-blowing to me. And this is the anger that the Democrats and the establishment have over Trump taking a picture with Kim Jong-un. And they're like, it gave him legitimacy. What does that mean? And this is one of the things that's so frustrating, about having a lack of media, fair media, and kind of the way our system, that's just talking point. What does that mean, gave him legitimacy? Explain to me. So, okay, now Kim Jong-un, he didn't have legitimacy, but he took a picture with Trump, and now he has legitimacy, and so, what? All of a sudden, a country like the UK is going to be like, oh shit, Kim Jong-un, he's legit. Let's start a trade deal with him. We're going to stop being allies with the United States and go with North Korea. Is there one country in the world that's happening in? Is there one country in the world that was like, oh, we weren't going to deal with North Korea, but now that Trump took a picture with Kim Jong-un, Trump, by the way, that everyone in the international community that supposedly our allies says is illegitimate and a buffoon anyways, but all of a sudden when he took a picture with Kim Jong-un, now Kim Jong-un's legitimate. What the heck are these people talking about? But again, here we see the frontrunner for the Democrats brings this up. Trump gave Kim Jong-un legitimacy. I wouldn't meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. Dude, you were part of an administration that sent pallets of cash in the middle of the night to one of our biggest enemies. The Secretary of State at the time, John Kerry, admitted that some of that money would go to terrorist organizations. They're now launching missiles at our troops. So you're saying talking with Kim Jong-un, unforgivable sin. Once more, I guess had Trump just sent him pallets of cash instead of taking a picture with him, then Biden and the Democrats would be okay with it. It's just insane. Like, they don't even... And because they control all the cultural institutions of power, and if you're new to my channel, this is a recurring theme that you'll hear a lot. One of the weak suits of the Republicans is they're always on the defensive, and that's because they allow the left, the establishment left, I guess, I shouldn't just say the left, to control the public narrative, because they control the mainstream media, they control academia, they control the entertainment industry, they control Silicon Valley. So they control the narrative. And so this narrative allows stupid talking points like a photo that gave Kim Jong-un legitimacy. And everybody just swallows that up like, oh, yeah. It's absurd. Just think about it for a second. Like, what? What are you talking about? Steyer says what we need to do to pressure Iran is exert economic pressure. He says economic pressure works in Iran, not military pressure. But just minutes earlier, he said he was for Obama giving pallets of cash to Iran. Now, let's think about this for a second. If a country's under economic pressure, then surely upping sanctions or something like that will turn the screws on them and make them capitulate to you more. Giving them money is the opposite of economic pressure. And I love how there's just this blanket assertion, oh, we're assured that Iran was never going to develop nukes because we gave them this money. Clearly, they had an interest in developing nuclear weapons, or they wouldn't have started immediately. Let's take the Democrat talking point. I don't know the truth because I can't trust our intel agencies. But let's assume that the Democrats are right and that Iran stopped their nuclear testing or their nuclear development until after the Iran deal was pulled out. Clearly, then, the fact that they immediately started testing again or started developing shows that they're interested in developing these weapons. And whenever the Iran deal would have ran out, they would have pursued once more to build weapons. It's like this entire idea. And again, I understand the issue. I have a lot of complaints with Israel and their lobbying in our country and them kind of having a hand in pressuring the United States to get involved in wars we have no business with. But one of the things with Israel, it's very complicated. It's either they're always evil or they're always good. That's the side. And for me, it's very complicated. That's not the case. So remember when Trump was talking about moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and there were all these people that were like, this is going to cause so much conflict. People are going to, there's going to be bombs and blood and conflict. You can't move it to Jerusalem. And it's like, yeah, the people that are launching the bombs because of buildings being moved, basically, they're the ones at fault. That's who's at fault. You're saying these people are so unreasonable that just moving the embassy would cause them to freak out and kill people. Okay, those probably aren't good people then. Just like the argument, right? NATO's this, how dare Trump criticize NATO? NATO's this great place. It's a great institution. Oh, it's so important. Our allies in NATO, it's so important. The same people that say that are the exact same people that said, we can't pull out of Syria. Are you nuts? Our NATO allies, the Turks, are bloodthirsty maniacs that will immediately commit genocide on the Kurds. Part of our NATO agreement is having nuclear weapons in Turkey. So these people are saying, yeah, we got to keep nuclear weapons in Turkey. They're an important ally. They're bloodthirsty maniacs, though. What? These double standards are ridiculous. We need to economically pressure Iran, but we need to give them billions of dollars. So, Dib, getting back to the point, sorry, I should be doing a better job with the chat here, so sorry about that. I'm getting behind on it, so I do apologize for that. Yeah, John, I'm going to talk about the Project Veritas video a lot before I end here. And the Burisma thing, Ziggy, I'll be talking about in a future. I'm not going to discuss it much because I think that's an interesting, complicated story. A good friend of mine on Twitter sent me Dan Bongino's podcast today. I recommend watching the first half hour of it. It's very informative, but I'll be talking about that in a later date. Okay, so getting back here. So, Dib, you were talking about not caring, even though this was in Iowa, they don't care about the rural people, and that's absolutely true. They could talk a big game. Remember, one of the big mistakes that Hillary made was talking about putting coal miners out of business. They could talk a big game. Now they've learned their lesson. Oh, no, we'll give them super other great jobs in the green field. Yeah, farmers, they're going to have like a super important role in the new economy, the non-fossil fuel economy. So they're trying to make claims like that. But when you listen to them, you can see that that's not their number one priority. They all say it. We're talking trade deals at this point in the debate, right? Trade deals. Okay? When you think trade deals, you're like, okay, what's our deal with China? What's our deal with Mexico? What's our deal with Canada? Etc. All they talk about was environmentalism. What does that have to do with the trade deal? And see, this is the truth about the climate change disaster. And I'll do another 2-hour live stream just on climate change. I will. But just hear me out here for a second. A lot of you that share my concerns with these foreign regime change wars know that the intel agencies and the government and the establishment often lied to us, and they'd say like, oh, Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya, whatever. It's always this boogeyman, right? Oh, we need to take your rights, we need to take your money, you need to send your poor kids over here to fight because of insert whatever evil country, okay? Now, that's not to say that I'm a pacifist and there aren't evil countries that deserve a militaristic response or evil organizations like ISIS. I'm not saying that. But it's clearly abused. It's clearly used by the powers that be to strip us of our rights, our wealth, etc. like that, more than it should. Well, the problem is with the advent of the internet and a global community and the fact that I can talk to a Russian right now online. That's not the way it used to be. I can talk to someone in Vietnam right now, almost all over the world. So it's hard to sell them as these evil, monstrous people. But what they've lost in being able to pitch you on that, they've more than gained with now the boogeyman being the climate. Oh, we're all dead from the climate. That's a big not imaginary, but it's a big non-physical enemy, right? It's not a person. It's a behavior. So they could criticize that. And they can't prove it. And they've been wrong over and over again. And they talk about, oh, there's a consensus. There's not. There's a consensus the climate's changing. And there's a consensus humans have something to do with it. That's the end of the consensus. Even a lot of climate change scientists that push for it say that we're talking about a 1.5 degree increase in Celsius in the next 100 years. They say that could cause somewhere 5% of our GDP. Then why would we fight that back with a Green New Deal that would cost like 60% of our GDP? Doesn't really make sense, does it? But anyways, they just want to fearmonger you. And that's what this is being used for. So now somehow in a discussion or debate about economic policy, trade, they're like, oh, these trade policies are a disaster for the farmers and blah, blah, blah in Iowa. But the climate, that's who we need to bring to the table, climate change. In other words, hey, farmers in Iowa, hey, rural people, why don't you just shut your mouth? We'll help you if you can, but what's really important is the climate change. Tom Steyer says, I declare a state of emergency immediately. Okay. So, where are we here? Oh, the computer acting up a little. Oh my god, that was just page 1 of 3. Good god. Try to get through this fast. I guess I'll be up till 1 in the morning, so I'm making good time. Okay, here's a contradiction that a nuanced explanation could maybe figure out how this isn't a contradiction, but certainly we didn't get that tonight. Or wait, maybe I'm not there yet. Let me just read what I wrote. Klobuchar and the rest are upset with Trump's trade war, but they praised the USMCA, which was brought about only because of Trump and actions like its trade war. This is, and I'll just get to the contradiction now. Here's the problem. They're all like, oh, the tariffs are bad, the trade wars are bad. But then simultaneously, almost every one of them are saying, oh, these corporations have benefited because they get cheap labor in China and other places that aren't following the rules. Well, you can't have it both ways, right? And this is more of just the pipe dream, pie in the sky. feels over facts that you get from these people. So let's say they pass their dream trade policy, it has to do with environmentalism and yay, all that good stuff. And then let's say China says, we're not going to listen to the conditions of this. We're going to continue polluting. We're going to continue, subsidizing things, tariffing your product. We're going to do all that. What's the response from the Democrats? What are they going to do? They're against tariffs. They say they won't do tariffs. I assume, seeing how they're all, even though they're liars, but they're all claiming to be anti-war. So this is the problem. And this is the problem that I talked about in one of the videos I did that I recommend you check out, about things like the idea of saying that the airliner that Iran took down was Trump's fault. Now you're saying, wait a minute, how does this tariff discussion have anything to do with that? It's because they exploit the fact that a lot of us are reasonably upset with a lot of governmental policies from both sides, whether it be foreign regime change wars, benefiting, bailing out banks, things like that. So what they do is they take that legitimate anger and then they take it to a ridiculous place, right? So they're like, yeah, foreign regime change wars is bad. All deterrence is bad. We should never have any conflict whatsoever. But there's a price to pay for having that mentality. No deterrence. Telling our opponents, hey, we'll never do anything if you attack us. We'll be wiped out in 10 years. The point I made in that video about the airliner is this. They're not saying, there's no proof that the attack on Soleimani led to Iran shooting down the airplane. The claim, the narrative that's being pushed by those wanting to blame Trump is because Trump blusterily came out and said, we're going to get you, Iran. If we're going to fight back. We're not Obama. You attack us, we're attacking back. That was it. It was the rhetoric. Then Iran was on edge. They see this airplane. They shoot it down because they're afraid it could be the U.S. All of that could have happened without Trump killing Soleimani. He could have said, we're going to get you, Iran. Iran could have been on edge. Iran shut down the plane. So what they're really complaining, those blaming Trump, what they're really complaining about is the fact that Trump suggested, not that he killed Soleimani, the fact that he suggested that we might retaliate if a country attacks our interest. In other words, we can't even suggest that we'll defend ourselves. That's what these people are saying. It's the same with this situation. They're saying, tariffs are always bad. We can't have tariffs. Okay, so if you're China and you hear that, you're like, so let me get this straight. The Democrats won the presidency and, they're controlling foreign policy now. They're controlling trade policy. And basically they've assured the American people and the world they'll never issue any kind of tariffs. They won't engage in any sort of militaristic response. Okay, we're just going to do whatever the hell we want then. How's that going to work out for the American worker? Now, you might have a disagreement with how effective were Trump's tariffs? Were they applied correctly? Was it haphazard? Those are nuanced discussions we can have. But to just blanket say these tariffs are immoral, they're hurting American workers, and deals like NAFTA were terrible, and, we need a USMCA. They also don't talk about the role that tariffs maybe had in the USMCA. Because even though it doesn't apply to China, Canada and Mexico are probably like, this guy he's willing to go the long haul here. We better come down with something. Now, is the USMCA the greatest deal in the world? I don't think so. But I'll be honest, I don't know a lot of the specifics of it. I really don't. I'm ill-informed to speak on it. But of course it could have been better, I'm assuming. But nonetheless, when you even have people like Bernie saying it's a moderate improvement, but I wouldn't vote for it. I mean, it's nonsense. So again, this is more of just feels over facts. So now no Democrat will ever issue any tariff. It's terrible. So if you vote for them, don't be surprised when every country in the world takes advantage of that. Any trade deal they sign will be totally worthless because there is no teeth to it because we can't even do anything economically about it. And I say again, Bernie, again with contradictory positions. Hated NAFTA because it benefited China, but he's against Trump's trade war with China that's trying to benefit the U.S. workers. How does he expect to get a fair deal for U.S. workers if he's unwilling to challenge China? Then we move on to climate change hysteria, which amounts to give the Democrats total control of your life, all of your money, blah, 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 or we're all going to die. Okay, so this is an interesting part where they get to the scandal about Bernie Sanders supposedly saying a woman couldn't win the presidency. Now, this is a stupid scandal, and it was clearly released by people in Elizabeth Warren's camp, and Elizabeth Warren knew about it. This is probably the most disgusting area of the debate just for CNN moderator garbage that was going on. So let me say, if this video hasn't already shown you, I have no love lost for Bernie Sanders. I think he's a hypocrite. I think his policies are dangerous and terrible. And anyone, I despise almost more than anyone, someone who claims to be your moral superior, but is a hypocrite. So, the light bulb I'm using is hurting the climate, but Bernie's 2 lake houses aren't. Sports car he's driving around's cool, but, me struggling to get a catalytic converter, to get my car running, I'm the real problem, over and over with Bernie. Lives in a gated community, wants open borders, crap like that. So, I have no love for Bernie, but I do not think that Bernie was going to say a woman couldn't win the presidency. First up, we have him from the 80s saying a woman could win no problem. He's publicly said it many times. Second, he's right. Hillary, by all accounts, should have won. It was only her hubris that cost her. And he said she won by 3 million votes. Whatever, that's not the system, you joker. You know that. But nonetheless, clearly a woman could win. I don't believe that Bernie would have said elsewise. So Elizabeth Warren is lying. Her and her team are lying. That's obvious to me. It's obvious a dirty trick. And that's what it is. It's a lie. It's irrelevant, but it's a lie. And it speaks to Elizabeth Warren's character. This isn't her lying about someone that she's ideologically opposed to. This is her lying about someone that she's most closest to lying to, that's running for president. And she's willing to lie and smear them. What do you think she'd be willing to do as president? This isn't like everyone says, well, Trump lies all the time. Trump lies are either hyperbolic and just like total insults, or they're weird, boastful claims that it's like, yeah, it's not good to lie about that stuff, but it's not lies that impact your life. Like, if you like your doctor, you could keep it. Like, he'll lie and say, no one supports women more than me. Okay, that's hyperbolic garbage, right? The biggest crowd size ever. Okay, hyperbolic garbage. Am I saying that's a good thing? No. But that's the type of stuff. By the way, the fact checkers that talk about all these lies, I've done video after video why these fact checkers themselves are lying. Like, oftentimes Trump will say something that's technically true, but they'll say, but Trump's intent in saying that was false. Okay, well, that's not fact-checking. You don't know his intent. But regardless, that's Elizabeth lying like this. It's a really bad look. And she's done it over and over and over again. She's always lying to make herself look like a victim. One of the most privileged people in the history of the world, and she needs to constantly lie to call herself a victim. I saw Jordan Peterson talk about this. Have you ever noticed where you get the most social justice warrior crap? It's almost always the most privileged people. You remember that video at Yale? It was like 4 or 5 years now, where you had this professor at Yale that him and his wife wrote something about like, hey, maybe we should chill out on like kind of canceling people over Halloween costumes. And this girl approaches the professor and screaming her head off. This is my home. I don't feel safe because of you. And I saw Jordan Peterson comment on this. It's like, here's the irony. These people already have more privilege than almost anyone in the history of the world. They're going to be they're Yale. They're going to be the movers and shakers of the United States and the world in the decades to come. Right? Yet that's not enough for them. Having all of that privilege isn't enough. They also want the victimhood. Someone I'm kind of interested in that I disagree with a lot, but is postmodernist Slavoj Žižek, who debated Jordan Peterson. He talks a lot about this. One of the things, it's actually an interesting movie, even if you don't agree with this philosophy. He's got a movie, it's called A Pervert's Guide to Ideology. He takes a lot of pop culture references and uses it to describe his philosophy. He does, one of the videos he did was on the Titanic. And at the end of it, and he talks basically about how horrible the woman is. And like, what's the story of the Titanic? Basically, this rich lady decides she's going to slum it up with some guy that's working in, the hull of the ship. And she not only takes all of his love and his emotional well-being, but she literally takes his physical well-being as she sits on, the thing floating away and he dies. And then she goes back to being rich and blah, blah, blah. Has a great, wonderful life. She had to slum it up. She had to take that victimhood. Use what little the poor people have in order to benefit themselves. That's what Elizabeth Warren does. The only thing people like me and you have, well, I can't speak for you, I don't know, but we might not have the money, the power, the privilege, but we have other things. You got the right to complain. And complaining's good sometimes, You got all the things that come with not being wealthy, so having to develop individual character, having to rely on family, things like that. They want that too. They want it all. So these privileged kids, they say, I'm a victim and I have all the privilege. That's Elizabeth Warren. And it's contemptible. It's disgusting. So let's move on with what's said here. So I said, Bernie says he never said a woman couldn't win. I believe him. Warren's camp is lying. Let this be a lesson to progressives. Elizabeth Warren is a fake. And I have friends that were Bernie supporters that are like, I think I'm going to go with Elizabeth because she seems a little more... I think she'll vote for all the same policies that Bernie pushed, the progressive ideals that I want, but she's more palatable to, like, mainstream Democrats, so she has a better chance of winning. And I was like, be careful, because she's a fake. The number one characteristic of Elizabeth Warren is she'll say whatever it takes to win. She'll throw Bernie under the bus in a heartbeat. She doesn't care. She doesn't care at all. If tomorrow polling would say Medicare for all sucks, she'd be off it in a heartbeat. You think she's going to be against foreign regime change wars? I kind of believe Bernie would maybe try. Elizabeth, she ain't going to care. Whatever. She's an establishment stooge. She's just an open book. Whatever they want her to do, she'll do. So just if you're out there and you're progressive, just be warned. By the way, just like I warned you over and over, you're cheering for the intel agencies right now because you hate Trump, but it's going to bite you in the ass. Because when you actually get whatever you want your candidate to be, a progressive or social justice warrior, if they don't align with the intel agency, guess what? They're going to get smeared just the same. And Bernie will, you saw what happened with Tulsi? Bernie will get the same treatment if he gets out of line. Then they go to Warren. Now, this was the most contemptible thing the moderators did. So they clarified with Bernie like 3 times. Did you tell Elizabeth Warren a woman couldn't win? No. Then they look at Elizabeth and say, how did you feel when Bernie told you a woman couldn't win? They didn't say, did Bernie tell you that? They didn't say that. They didn't ask a question. They just assumed that that's what Bernie said. And I saw a lot of Bernie supporters on Twitter, oh, this is outrageous. People that, even though I disagree with politically, that have been on the right side of the Russiagate thing. So they hate Trump, but they understood that the Russiagate garbage was crap, that siding with the intel agencies were crap. People like Matt Taibbi from formerly the Rolling Stone, Glenn Greenwald, Michael Tracy, Jimmy Dore, these type of people. I saw some of those characters. Oh, they were furious. Oh, the media, their mistreatment of Trump. Oh, yeah. Or mistreatment of Bernie. Yeah, Trump's gone through that 1,000-fold. So how do you think you feel as a Trump supporter? Like, oh my God, the media, 95% against Trump. Bernie gets a little taste of it and they're like, oh, this is outrageous. But get in line. I guess you should have spoke up a little more when they were attacking Trump with lies like that, huh? Then Warren goes off on this. You just have to watch it for yourself. Let me see if I can paraphrase for you what Warren said. My genitals make me magic. I have a vagina. People with vaginas are the best. We're awesome. The only one who can win at politics is people with vagina. Let's talk about our genitals. My genitals are best. Vote for Elizabeth's genitals, 2020. That's Warren's pitch. Klobuchar says, thanks. Agreed. I mean, what a joke. What does that have to do with anything? And it's clear that Elizabeth put this story out there because she's like, okay, I'm falling behind Bernie. What can I do? This story makes Bernie look bad, and it gets her back to her big selling point. I'm a woman, just like it was with Hillary, right? Most normal people don't care. They don't care at all. And in fact, especially in the Democratic primary, being one of the cultural Marxist oppressed groups, so by gender, male's oppressor, female's oppressed, right? Or white's oppressor, other colors oppressed, etc. Being part of the, quote, oppressed group, particularly in the Democratic primary, but I also think in the general election, is a benefit as far as getting people to vote for you. In other words, I think there probably were racists that didn't vote for Obama because he was black. My guess is 99.9% of those racists wouldn't have voted for Obama anyways because they didn't like his policies. But I bet there were far more people that voted for Obama because he was black. And that's the big line. It's like, and you could say, oh, I'm just trying to, as a white man, I'm just trying to sound like a victim. No, there are times when being a man benefits you. For example, I have friends that got into nursing. Some of my female friends that got into nursing had difficulty finding jobs. Male nurses are in such high demand. Now, does that mean everything in life? That's the problem with this cultural Marxism, this oppressor-oppressed narrative. The truth is, we're all individuals, and that takes away from it. But even beyond that, each of these categories that they're talking about are both oppressor and oppressed at the same time. In other words, sometimes it's advantageous to be white, sometimes it's advantageous not to be white. You could tit for tat if you want and say, well, which one's more advantageous, whatever. It's garbage. It's a fruitless endeavor. Individuality, that's what's good. And when you start to take, and I've heard Jordan Peterson and others say this as well, so I can't take credit for it, but when you start to go out to the logical extreme, the ultimate minority is the individual. Because you'll always be able to argue with each other. Oh, I'm more oppressed than you because of my geographic location. Yes, but I share that, but I'm also disabled. Yes, I share that and disabled, but I'm also black. Yes, I share disabled and black, but I'm also a pagan. I have all those characteristics, but in addition to that, I'm poor. And it just goes on and on and on. And ultimately, there's no one that has all of the categories that you as an individual has. And therefore, the ultimate minority is the individual. It's so stupid. They'll get there eventually, don't worry. But not Elizabeth Warren. She's more than happy to play the identity politics. So, I guess good for her. If you're considering voting for Elizabeth Warren, somehow her genitals make her the preferred candidate. She didn't explain it. I didn't pay much attention in health class, I'll admit, so I'm a little confused about the whole thing, but maybe someone will be able to explain to me how genitalia impacts how good of a leader you could be, how good of a president. I guess we'll see. Women's are the best, right? All right. That's worthless. Then you had this strange moment where Elizabeth's like, I'm the only person that's beat a Republican incumbent in 30 years. And Bernie's like, I beat a Republican incumbent. And she's like, when? He's like, 1990. And she's like, but so it's 30 years. It was 30 years. That was 30 years ago. And Bernie's like, yeah. Well, I said 30 years, says Liz. Are you kidding me? It just epitomizes the pettiness and the stupidity of this whole thing. I thought it was hilarious. Let's see. Then we came to the best part of the debate. A break. They come back from break. Same thing I've heard 100 times. Bernie's asked how much is Medicare for all plan will cost. He refuses to answer. If it's such a good plan, why not just say? There's only two explanations. One, he doesn't know, which is pretty troubling. Or second, he's intentionally withholding the truth from you. Neither of those are good. And he's been asked over and over, not just in this debate, and he always takes that route. So's Warren. Klobuchar mentions her dads had been married 3 times. I actually was interested in his 2 failed marriages. We could have had like a Jerry Springer. It would have been more entertaining than the debate. Already talked about that. We talked about that. Yeah, we already did the healthcare business. So I'm skipping by it. Again, everyone's talking about lobbyists being a problem. I don't disagree with that. But again, we have fundamental disagreements on how to solve that. A lobbyist can only... Picture this. Let's say you're at work. The idea of lobbyist is someone kind of using their influence to push for undue privilege or undue benefits, right? So let's take an example that's maybe easier to understand. So take your work, and let's say, there are 10 people that work with you, and you have this boss, and your one coworker continues to influence the boss to give them special privileges. So, whether they're offering them money or offering some kind of favors or something, but they're getting special privileges, right? That only works if your boss gives out special privileges. If your boss is like, I can't give out privileges. I'm not in charge of giving out the bonuses. I'm not in charge of who parks where. I'm not in charge of setting the schedule. Then the lobbying efforts of your coworker won't work, and they'll stop lobbying. It's not the lobbying that's the problem. And I don't have a problem with lobbying. It's shady, it seems crappy, but it's not the lobbyist that's the problem. It's the government official taking whatever the lobbyist is giving to influence their decision to benefit the lobbyist interest. That's the problem. It's the government that's the problem. So the solution to that for, particularly Bernie and Elizabeth, but all the Democrats is, let's make the government more powerful. Well, that will just encourage more lobbying because the government will have more power to pick winners and losers in the economic marketplace. which will encourage more people to lobby, say, ooh, I don't want to be punished by the government. Ooh, I hope my competitor's punished by the government. And so that will increase the amount of lobbying. So I just think that, again, this is another thing where people are just like, corporations are evil, therefore we need bigger government. Guess what? Government's evil too. It sucks too. So we can have a disagreement. I think I'm on the right side of this. But again, I'm considered immoral if I have this problem. If I want smaller government in a response to lobbyists. I disagree. Mayor Pete, he chimes in, repeating the nonsense about the gender pay gap. It's been debunked. It's a joke. And one of the things, so here's another feels thing, right? All these Democrats are going to start talking about free childcare for everyone. Now listen, it sounds noble. It sounds good. But remember, what's the bill on this crap going to be? Free everything. Free college, free healthcare, free childcare. Is there anything that won't be free? We don't have to worry, like I said before, we don't have to worry about paying for anything. Who has time to pay for stuff when you're collecting all these free goodies? We won't even have time, Every day I'll just be waking up like, give me the free this, give me the free that. You'll be walking around just picking money off the money tree. You won't have time to pay things. Come on. You kidding? But aside from that, aside from the cost of it, there are costs that come with a lot of this stuff, and there are implications behind it. So it sounds good, like all this childcare stuff's good. And certainly there are people that legitimately could use help with childcare. So I don't know about poo-pooing the entire idea. But what this is a greater scheme and a kind of this social engineering that's been going on for years, in my opinion, for those on the establishment left. And that is kind of making government the parent. They've set up an economic situation that almost requires a two-parent or two-income household. So the man and woman have to work. Remember, it wasn't like this. Now, I'm not saying that I was against the idea of women getting in the workforce. Women should be allowed to our government and our system should be set up so that men and women, to the most reasonable extent, could make the same choices. That's the way the laws are set up. But social engineering is down to a science, and they know how to influence people with policies to influence the decisions they make. And all accounts show that women are far more, in general, unhappy post this massive entering into the workforce than they were prior to it. And it's led to all sorts of problems that we're having. It could contribute to over-medication of children, things like that. Because when you have a parent raising a child, that old tried and true formula, a two-parent household where one's the breadwinner and one's the caretaker. And by the way, I'm not saying this to denigrate women. I don't care. To me, that is the greatest job in the history of mankind, is raising children. It's an incredible job that I would be nowhere if I didn't have a mom that did that for me. So I'm lucky. I was one of the lucky ones. Everything shows us that growing up in a two-parent household is one of the most important factors you could have into achieving success in life. This is all known. We know that children out of wedlock in the inner city is 75%. In other rural communities, it's as high as 65, 70%. And you see more problems with drugs, with suicide, with incarceration, poverty. All of that can be, in my opinion, directly attributed to two-parent households. So what's being suggested here to me is more of the idea of encouraging two-income families and keeping parents from raising children. The irony is Steyer actually talks about, the ages of 1 to 4 are the critical ages for children. Yes. So wouldn't we want to set up a situation where the parent could be with the child as opposed to, don't worry, the government will send a nanny to take care of your kid? And we see how well when the government gets involved in things like education, how they indoctrinate. Because remember, that's one of the big victories that the establishment left has had. They totally control academia. It's not just the universities. They're indoctrinating kids as early as preschool. Read someone like Karen Strawn or Christina Hoff Sommers that talk about the war on boys. They now set, things that your grandparents would have said was just normal behavior for boys, like being rambunctious, running around, getting a little rough and tumble at recess. Now you get medicated. And all sorts of crap like that. Not to mention just the indoctrination of all of this perverse cultural marks of U.S. bad, blah, blah, blah. Don't get me wrong. It used to be the reverse. Take Indians. That's a good example to me. Remember, Western films used to be Indians were savages and the noble cowboys that were fighting them. And now it's totally reversed. The Indians are the noble, they were great people, and then the evil Westerners that came in. The truth is, both sides had good and crappy people. I know, it's complicated. No one wants to think like that, though, right? What's the same with our school books? It used to be the U.S. could do it all wrong. Rah, rah, rah. Now it's, the U.S. is a terrible place. So, as far as I'm concerned, this whole healthcare talk, whatever, it seems well-intended, but if you read between the lines, to me, it's more, we need you to be good little worker bees. Go be productive. Go work for a big company. Don't worry, the government will take care of your kids. We'll teach them right from wrong. So, be careful what you wish for when it comes to stuff like that. Again, sorry, I'm going to get through this. I'm almost through it. I'm sorry I haven't been looking at the chat. I'll check it out as soon as I'm done with my notes here. Then we had Elizabeth Warren talking about, like, my friend got a hold of me. He's like, did she just say Aunt B? She had her Aunt B, like, from Andy Griffith's show. She had to thank her. She starts talking about, oh, I had a job and I had kids. I remember how hard it was. Settle down there, Elizabeth. Last time you started talking about things like this and you said you got fired for being pregnant, you lied. So, who knows if she's telling the truth, but... Again, another example of one of the most privileged people on the planet claiming they're a victim. They briefly went on to the impeachment stuff. So just the irony, once more, just to point it out, the same people that were questioning Trump listening to the intel agents and bombing Soleimani and not pulling troops out of the Middle East are now saying, oh, but trust the intel agencies when it comes to impeachment. Klobuchar says she wants witnesses in the Senate trial. How did the House vote to impeach Trump if they didn't have witnesses? Oh, they did have witnesses. Well, wait a minute. If there are witnesses that they needed to hear from before they made up their mind, why would they vote to impeach? In other words, if the already available witnesses in the House were good enough to vote for impeachment, wouldn't those witnesses be good enough for the trial of impeachment to see if there's removal? Oh, no, now magically we need more witnesses. Isn't this an admission that they voted to impeach without hearing from all of the relevant witnesses? And how come she's not speaking up for Biden or Hunter to testify? Now, I said this on Twitter and someone said, well, they're irrelevant. They weren't involved in the phone call. Well, neither was the whistleblower. But that started was whistleblower there for the phone call? Nope. Very few people were. Yet many people who weren't there did testify about it. Look, I've spent hours and hours and hours on the impeachment thing, so I'm not going to rehash it all right now. But suffice it to say, here's the nuts and bolts of it. The Democrats are not saying impeach Trump for a quid pro quo. It's clear that this is the case because we know the Democrats had no problem with Obama and Biden issuing a quid pro quo to the Ukraine. Biden admitted it. Remember? He said at that CFR meeting, I told Ukraine, I'm leaving in 6 hours. I'm getting on that plane. You're not getting this $1 billion unless you fire Shokin, the prosecutor who happened to be looking into his son. And they said, you're not the president. And he said, call him. That's what Obama said. You got 6 hours. And so they said, okay, we'll fire him. That's a quid pro quo. The Democrats were fine with it. No impeachment articles. The media was fine with it. No one spoke up. So it's clear that the Democrats and the media, and all of the establishment left people, the intel people and the State Department people, they didn't have a problem with quid pro quos. What they have a problem with is what is the intent behind the quid pro quo. Now, we haven't even had an investigation into what Obama and Biden's intent was, but everybody's made up their mind. Oh, their intent was noble. It was to end corruption. And they've all made up their mind about Trump. Oh, Trump's intent was just to benefit himself. Well, how do you know that? Well, because it was about Biden. And Biden's his political rival. Okay. Well, one, the Democrats didn't want egg in their face before the 2016 election, so firing a prosecutor looking into one of the Democrats' sons might have also been for political benefit. And second, his agents went around the world to all sorts of our allies asking for evidence against Trump's crimes, including three Democratic senators writing a letter to the Ukraine asking them to give Mueller evidence against Trump. So it's clear that just because you were asking a foreign country if your opponent committed a crime, that's not reason for impeachment. But they just know Trump's a bad dude, so it must be impeachable. The entire impeachment case against Trump, from day one, every witness that's been called, everything the media's been talking about, everything Schiff and the Democrats have been talking about, all they're trying to do is to prove there was a quid pro quo. That's it. If I concede every argument that every one of these Democrats made, every single argument that they made in the impeachment stuff, all that does is get us exactly where we're at with Obama and Biden. There was a quid pro quo. Okay, now what was Trump's intent? They can't speak to it. They have no idea. And there's credible reasons that, one, Trump's intent was he doesn't like giving this foreign aid. Two, he thought there was massive amounts of corruption. 3, he wanted to make sure that Zelensky was a person who would out corruption. 4, he was legitimately concerned about the misuse of $1 billion by the Obama administration. All of that's plausible. So, what does all this mean? So, if you're interested in that, trust me, it's one of my favorite topics to talk about, the corruption and the coup against Trump. And I'll be talking about it more in the future. But why does that have to do with this? Because this person's saying, well, why would you want Hunter or Biden or Joe Biden to testify? Because the case for removing Trump or impeaching Trump should be, did he have a reason to, one, was there a quid pro quo? But more importantly, even if there was a quid pro quo, was it legit? We know that all these people said it was legit when Obama did it because it was to stop corruption. So was there corruption that Trump was trying to out? And who would you talk to about that? Hunter and Joe Biden. That's who you'd talk to. Therefore, those witnesses should be called. Kudos to Rand Paul for suggesting that he's going to attempt to call them as witnesses. Weird, though, that Klobuchar and all these people demanding witnesses aren't for them. Huh. Isn't that weird? Anytime someone doesn't want to testify that could harm Trump, they say, what is Trump hiding? But when it's the Bidens, they're like, how dare you even suggest it? Then we had, possibly the most ironic moment of the night, which is the Dems bringing up McCarthy. I mean, this isn't, it was Klobuchar that did it. I mean, this is insane. Do you remember what Joe McCarthy was about, right? Claiming everyone was member of the Communist Party, was with Russia, the Soviet Union, right? That's what McCarthy was about. I'm not going to get into exactly what was going on, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. I said nuts and bolts 3 times today. What am I doing? Not a phrase I normally use. Gist, that's the gist of it. Which party has been screaming everyone's a secret Russian agent for the past 3 years? Was it Trump? Was it the Republicans? Sean Hannity? Was it Tucker Carlson? Rush Limbaugh? Mark Levine? Was it those guys? Oh no! It was the Democrat Party. Nancy Pelosi tweeted out yesterday, who do we want to decide our elections? The people of this country or Russia? Still on the Russia crap. In the impeachment articles, still mentioning Russia. Even after Mueller exonerated Trump and everyone on his team from colluding with Russia. Even after the IG report showed that the entire Steele dossier was crap. Still on about the Russia crap. Non-stop. And then you're going to accuse the other side of McCarthyism? They have no self-awareness. But here's the thing. They get away with it because the Republicans are always on defense and they allow the establishment Democrats to control the narrative. Let me just get in my soapbox here for a minute. Who is your representative if you're in a Republican district? What have they done against this coup? The biggest issue facing our country right now. Again, let me stress this to even my left-wing friends. What Tom Steyer say? Climate change is the big issue. Some people say you're on the left. Maybe you think pro-choice is the biggest issue. Maybe you think that getting rid of the Second Amendment is the biggest issue. Whatever. Right or left. Whatever your issue is, I'm here to tell you it doesn't matter as long as there are unelected bureaucrats and intel officials deciding who could win elections and taking down people they don't like. So I hope whatever your issue is, that the FBI agrees. I hope that James Comey agrees. I hope that Chris Wray agrees. Because if not, your issue ain't going to be looked at all. That's why no matter what your big issue is, your number one priority should be getting this corruption done. That should be the number one priority. Yeah, here we have all the Democrats, all of them. And it's so funny, I see all these people I mentioned, the Matt Taibbi's, Glenn Greenwald's, Michael Tracy, they all support Bernie, yet they'll call it hypocrisy from people on the right, yet they never address the fact that they all know Russiagate was a huge hoax, that it was supporting the intel community, and Bernie went along with it, hook, line, and sinker. They just conveniently ignore that. Oh, trust us, Bernie would fight the intel agencies when he's in there, but yeah, he's supporting them now. Warren says that Trump wanted the investigations into Biden just to benefit himself. Like I said in the live stream last night, the Democrats they investigated left no stone unturned into Trump. Anyone connected to him wiretapped, had the FBI, break protocol and have abuses 17 times. It was actually more than that, but let's just go with that number. Spying on people connected to Trump's campaign, raiding his lawyer's office in the middle of the night, raiding people that would just, like Roger Stone, that just were allies of Trump while he's in his underwear, while they tipped CNN off to record it. And they came in with their guns pointed. All of that was totally cool. But the very moment that you suggest investigating Democrat corruption, oh my God, that's impeachable. That's what the impeachment's about. It's not just about trying to influence the 2020 elections. Clearly, that's part of it. But the real thing is, we have to make sure we do whatever we can to discourage anyone ever from investigating our corruption. That's what it's about. Then I wrote, if you ever needed proof these people will lie to get power about climate change, Mayor Pete is talking about climate change, and what's he talk about? The Australian wildfires. Those were set by arsonists. There's no proof whatsoever that climate change has anything to do with it. Now, this is what they did. It's funny because they always talk about science, and they'll tell you this all the time. And this is a true criticism. Like, you'll have some guy, be like, I don't know, I keep hearing about global warming, but it's freezing outside. It's been freezing for a week here. Where's that global warming? And they'll say, listen, weather isn't evidence of climate. Just because in your specific locale a weather event is going on, that's not indicative of climate change. Yet every time there's a big storm or there's a fire or something, what do they say? Climate change, that's proof of climate change. There was a hurricane, that's climate change. A fire, that's climate change. This is the party of science, By the way, back to the, Elizabeth voting for Elizabeth Warren's genitals. I thought that there was no biological difference between men and women. Isn't that what the Democrats, the woke people tell us? Men can be women, men can menstruate, men can have children. So why couldn't, what would Elizabeth Warren say if Joe Biden came out and said, yeah, you're right, I'm a woman? Would she say, oh, well, then clearly you're most qualified. About time we have a real woman elected for president. Ain't that right, Elizabeth Warren? Just goes to show how insane contradictory their positions are. Steyer says he'll declare a state of emergency on climate change in day one. And like I said, this is the boogeyman they're using. They fearmonger. We're all dead in 10 years. I'll go back. I'll tell a little story here. I have a friend. Sorry if I'm going long. I hope people don't mind. Feel free to tune out anytime you like. But I don't know. I'm awake. I'm having fun with it tonight. So I have a friend that I had a debate with about this. A smart guy. He's a left-leaning person. I think one of my best friends. Really good guy. Smart guy too. And we were talking about climate change, and I was like, give me the ins and outs. And he's like, yeah, I feel like in the next 100 years, humanity's wiped off the face of the earth. That's how important climate change is. And I was like, well, how confident are you in that? He's like, yeah, 90%. I was like, okay. So you think we need to, how long do we have? Well, we only have a short amount of time, 10. It might be too late already. It's probably too late already, is what he said, was his exact words. And I was like, well, what should we do? Well, we need to, as soon as possible, eliminate fossil fuels, almost immediately. And I was like, okay. Let's take a country like India, for example. Now, the life expectancy of people in India in the past 20 years, 25 years maybe, has almost doubled. And that's because it was a country that was so impoverished, that had the average person there so impoverished, they didn't have access to energy. And, whether it be heat exhaustion, things like that, but all sorts of things, proper cooling and refrigeration of food, just having energy. And if you see their energy infrastructure, it's nuts. They got generators running. I saw this special, for some reason, Dave Letterman of all people's over there. It's just these wires hanging. You can't believe it. It looks crazy. But even that primitive infrastructure of energy has led to massive increases in life expectancy and quality of life. Who are you going to be to go to India and say, look, congratulations on your rudimentary energy infrastructure. Unfortunately, it needs to stop now because it's using dirty coal, not even clean coal, diesel generators, some of the dirtiest forms of energy. So we're going to have to take it all out. Almost immediately, right? There's not going to be time to have a smooth transition to renewables, which even in a country like the United States will take decades. In India, it would take even longer. So sorry, you people just have to die. Sorry. And why? Because of a hunch. You think it's probably already too late, and you think there's a 10% chance it won't kill us all anyways. So just in that slim chance, you tell these people you need to die. Now, are you willing to do that? And he says, yeah, they're all dead anyways. Do you see? Do you see the insanity? How even a reasonable, and this is a reasonable person. This isn't a zealot. This isn't some Antifa maniac. Even that person, with just a little prodding, could call for the genocide of poor. Who's going to be affected the most? The poor people. That's who will be screwed in every country, not just India. But they have to die on your hunch. Now, how certain are you? You're willing to take that chance? You're willing to sentence these people to death? This fear-mongering is more effective than any fear-mongering that they've ever used with a particular country being our enemies. You think the atrocities of the Patriot Act were bad, based on fear of terrorism? Wait until you see the freedoms you'll have to give up in the efforts to fight climate change. Just read the Green New Deal. No, now they're talking, it should be illegal to own a home. It should be illegal to own a car. It should be illegal to eat meat. Total control over your life. That's what it'll be. And again, I say this all the time. We see what they want, what their ideal government is. Look at San Francisco. Look at LA. They want a return to feudalism. That's what globalism's about. The biggest impediment to globalism is the middle class, particularly in countries like the United States. What they want is them, the elites that rule over us all, and then people that are poor and that are reliant on the elites for survival. They want feudalism. They want to be living in the castle on the hill while us serfs beg for them from below. That's what they want. Bread and circuses, like in the movie Gladiator. Sure. And again, it's not just right-wing people that have criticized this. Go back and look at someone like Michel Foucault, a big postmodernist. By no means am I an expert, but I'm slightly familiar with. He talks about the idea of biopower. And that is, if you give the government control to give you life, you also give the government control to take your life away. And we basically end up in a metaphorical matrix, right? Where we have this relationship where even though the machines are our masters, we're relying on them totally for sustenance. So that's their ideal. Just look at the utopias of San Francisco and LA. That's what they want for the rest of the world. All right, that's my notes with the debate. Now, admittedly, I tuned out a little early. I don't know how long it went because I wanted to be with you great people. So I tuned out a little early, and that's where we're at. So let me check real quick, see if... let's see... Oh, so I'm lying about life expectancy in India. Okay, let me look it up real quick. I might have got the years wrong, 20 year. It was in 1970, it was 47 years. And now today it is 68 years. So a 21 over since 19, so 50 years and not 20. Apologize there, Arms. I guess I am a dirty liar. But yeah, thanks for at least holding me to account. But it is true that cheap energy has massively improved not only their life expectancy, but their quality of life. Now, aside from the debate, I wanted to talk about Bernie-related stuff today. So, if you check my video out, the last video I did before just the announcement of doing this live stream was about the Project Veritas video. So let me be clear of what I was saying with that Veritas video. For those of you that didn't see it, it's a field organizer for Bernie's campaign who came out and said, we'll need to re-educate Trump supporters if Bernie wins. Bernie's Education for All plan is basically primarily to re-educate Trump supporters because they're so horrible. And gulags weren't really a bad thing in the Soviet Union. You got a living wage there. And so I guess implying that we'd have to send Trump supporters to gulags to re-educate them. And then he says, because if you're suggesting the elimination of someone based on race or religion, you deserve violence. Okay, no one's really saying that. It's just hyperbolic. Then he says if Bernie's not the nominee, they'll light Milwaukee, where the Democratic convention is, on fire. If Trump wins, there'll be violence, etc. Now, let me first say what this is not. I am not blaming Bernie and saying he's responsible for the hiring of this guy. And I didn't know this in my video earlier today, but I did allude to this could be the fact that this guy wasn't a high-ranking person. I did say he achieved the level of field organizer, but after looking into it more, I think that that's like a second rung from the bottom. Like you have your average volunteer and then field organizer. So this wasn't like a campaign manager or something like that. And look, it could very well be the case that Trump or Biden or whoever, someone in their campaign could come out and say nut job too if we have some sort of video. And I'm not going to blame Biden or Klobuchar or Trump if there's some nut there. However, there are some things that are worth talking about here of what's going on. the first thing is, this is something that is a problem with socialism and communism and massive government control over things in the first place. When you give the government that type of power, let's assume for a minute, as I said in the video, that Bernie's well-intended. I don't have proof that he is, but let's assume that he is, just for the sake of argument. And I know I had people railing on me. Well-intended, Bernie's not well-intended. It doesn't matter, because if he's not well-intended, then this clearly applies even more. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, he's well-intended. The problem is that even if he's well-intended, his ideas could eventually be perverted, because once you say the government has the total authority, well, when there's a problem that rises up, the only thing you know how to do is solve it with government authority. So you have dissidents, you have people speaking up against him. Do you think Stalin or Mao, the first time someone spoke up against him, was like, shoot him? Probably not. They're probably like, well, we could deal with it. But then as problems arise, people start starving. Things aren't as easy as you thought. The economy starts going down because of your disastrous government control policies. Well, now you got to do something. Maybe lock them up, put them in gulags, maybe kill them. And maybe you wouldn't do that. But guess what? There's someone around you that will do that. And those people, the bloodthirsty people, the maniacs that you would least likely to be in control, those are the people that will eventually get control. It happens every single time. Every time. And the next thing you know, we're talking about possibly hundreds of millions of people dying under Mao and Stalin's regimes. We have no clue, by factors of tens of millions, how many people died. Project Veritas is blatant propaganda. I wonder, Arms, do you speak up for that in CNN and other places like that? I love how, and this is always, you'll hear this a lot from the establishment Democrat, right? They say, for example, when Joe Biden announced his quid pro quo in his speech, they say, oh, Joe Biden was lying. Don't believe what Joe Biden said. Don't believe him. So Biden lied there, but he's telling the truth about everything else. It's always, you can't trust what you actually see in the video. We can't believe that this Jurek guy actually said this. We can't, because it's Project Veritas and they're wrong. Yet the same people will, without batting an eye, will quote you the New York Times or CNN or MSNBC or the Washington Post or any of these other outlets that have lied and been blatantly wrong about basically tons of things since Trump has been elected. They won't say, oh, CNN, that's blatant propaganda. New York Times, blatant propaganda. But anytime there's a right-wing source, oh, that's blatant propaganda. I saw what this guy said, Arms. You can deny it if you want. That's fine. They always, well, what was the context? I don't know. What's the context of saying that it's okay to throw Trump supporters in gulags? You tell me. What's the context that would work? Oh, it's propaganda, so it doesn't matter. So the point is, even the style of system that Bernie's advocating for would eventually allow kind of maniacs like this to get in some seat of power. And eventually this would be used. And we can see it because you can see when, on a low-level scale, when these types of social justice warrior people get slight positions of power, how they abuse it, right? Like on campuses, how they want to censor conservative speakers. On Silicon Valley, like on Twitter and things like that, how they want to shadow ban or ban conservatives. The double standards are too numerous to even discuss. You give them these positions of authority. Now, is banning someone from Twitter the same as a gulag? Absolutely not. But the point is, they will abuse this power if given to them. That's why it's best to have a localized government as much as possible. To have a small government as much as possible. I'm not an anarchist. But when you give the government the power over all of these areas of your life, they could abuse that power. And it's almost always, at some point, will be abused. That's why we should reject this idea of this massive government power. Arms, any comment on CNN or any of these other people lying or cherry-picking things? Oh, no? Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, buddy. But I'm glad you're here, even if you disagree with me. It helps keep people honest, even if you're lying. So that's a good thing. So that's one of the areas where Bernie is to blame. I don't blame him for the specific advocacy here. Now, there's two other areas that are worth talking about with Bernie. The second is what people are kind of speaking to here is kind of the idea of Bernie's revolution and things like that. I'm not even going to say it's Bernie's words per se, but certainly there is a large factor of Bernie supporters that have, publicly talked about things like this. I would be willing to bet if you polled Antifa members, probably a good portion of them would say, I'm not going to vote, I don't believe in the political process. But those that will probably support Bernie. We see this in academia. There are certainly those that espouse this sort of, is it okay to punch a Nazi? Yes. And then, what's the danger with that? Everyone I disagree with is a Nazi. Oh, CNN, Cool, Armstrong. How about the New York Times? How about MSNBC? Can you list me any, left-leaning sites that aren't biased, that aren't cherry-picking? Just curious. And they always say, by the way, I love that excuse. That's something you always hear from these leftists. Oh, it's not that they're politically biased, New York Times or CNN. They're just doing they'll say what they think they can to have money. That's garbage. You don't think there's a market for being counter to what everyone else is saying? Look at shows that are by all means middling, like Roseanne's show before she got fired or Last Man Standing. Just a couple shows out of all of them that try to take a conservative slant, and look how popular they are. So don't feed me this line of crap. Oh, they're not really interested politically. Of course they are. Yes, their number one agenda is to maintain their status as the gatekeepers of power. But you don't think there was money to be made or story to be had in the abuses of the FBI and the FISA scandal? Of course there was. They chose not to do it because they're politically motivated, not just financially motivated. Not as if financial motivation somehow makes it okay anyways. But, hey Joe, nice to see you, man. Anyways, enough spending time. So certainly this is a prevalent mindset in a lot of Bernie supporters. Not all of them, and I hope a minority of them. But certainly it's out there. And so you would think it would behoove Bernie to say something. And this is where it gets to the biggest criticism I have of Bernie of the whole situation. The third thing. Now, unfortunately, my OBS was acting up today, and I couldn't bring up, but it's time for my favorite segment, and that is my time capsule, where I go back and something I wrote a long time ago. It could be weeks, it could be years, and how it's relevant in today's world. So I'm going to read you again from Above Top Secret. This writing was August 15th, 2017. So, more than 2 years ago. And I want to read you what I wrote about Bernie Sanders and the Democrats particularly. Now, this is coming off the Charlottesville attacks. And what this is going to be about is how all of these Democrats blame Trump for Charlottesville. And they said that his rhetoric caused Charlottesville. And I started to notice a pattern. Anytime you have a perceived person that's conservative or on the right that leads to an attack, all of these people come out of the woodwork to say, this is Trump's fault. This is Republicans' fault. It's their rhetoric that caused this. But then when we see violence that comes from the left, they say, all violence is bad. We should tone down all rhetoric. Do you see the difference? When it's someone on the right, it's specifically the fault, and there needs to be specific, because remember, the criticism of Trump was, he said all sides were bad. Outrageous. He needs to call out the villainy that is right-wing violence. So let's see how the Democrats respond when it's left-wing violence. Here's me talking. Or writing, and I'll let you know when I'm quoting. I do really apologize that I can't bring this up, but what I will do is, I guess, if you'd like to follow along, there's no reason I can't do this, is post this for you all to follow, if you would like. Okay, so let us begin. I said, it's so transparent, but apparently we need a refresher. Remember when the Berkeley riots happened? For those of you that don't know, Antifa, the people that the media and others would have you believe were the innocent heroes of the left at Charlottesville, decided to beat people, including women, and burn down and smash buildings because a right-wing speaker was coming to campus. What was the response from many on the left of this? Some in the media and elsewhere either didn't condemn the violence or straight up blamed the victims, or both. By the way, I know, but here's a bunch of tweets that came out. Hollywood director Judd Apatow threatened Trump supporters with a since-deleted tweet in which he stated, and this is in response to the Berkeley riots, this is just the beginning. When will all the fools who are still supporting Trump realize what is at stake? The mayor of Berkeley, Jesse Arreguin, also legitimized the riots by calling them a reaction to, quote, hate speech. After the riots, Google engineer Adrian Porter Felt called on people to donate to UC Berkeley. BuzzFeed's Hannah Joel apparently thought the beating and pepper spraying of women was funny. MSNBC producer Kyle Griffin slammed Trump for being, quote, upset over a Breitbart editor, presumably unaware of the fact innocent people were beaten. Vice columnist Hussein Kasvani main gripe was that Maya Yiannopoulos was made to appear reasonable. Or here's a gem from a CNN guest. On Thursday night, CNN hosted former Clinton administrator Labor Secretary Robert Reich, and then proceeded to spread conspiracy theories about who was really behind the violence at Berkeley. Reich even tried to make the connection that Breitbart was somehow connected to the campus violence. In other words, they were saying it was a false flag. Antifa wouldn't really do this. I continue. Most Democratic politicians chose not to mention the riots at all. But let's move on to what I think is a better example, the shooting of Steve Scalise. This was done by someone who worked on Bernie's campaign, and this is why I bring it up. key on what exactly Bernie's going to say in response to all this. This was done by someone who worked on Bernie's campaign and was a huge anti-Republican. What did someone on the left have to say about this? So what did Bernie himself say? Surely he denounced the left-wing violence and rhetoric. This is a quote from Bernie from NPR. I've just been informed, I'm not going to try to do the Bernie voice. I've just been informed that the alleged shooter at the Republican baseball practice is someone who apparently volunteered at my presidential campaign, the Vermont Independent said in a brief remarks to Senate floor. I am sickened by this despicable act. Let me be as clear as I could be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms. Real change can only come about through nonviolent action. Anything else runs counter to most deeply American values. That actually doesn't sound that bad to me, right? So let's see what I write. I say, wait a second. Violence of any kind? Sounds like he's not directly calling out the violent left. Oh, well, maybe that's his style. It's not like he would blame one side and just, let's take another issue. When Gifford got shot, surely he condemned all violence there as well. Here's part of his fundraising he sent out after Gifford was shot. Congresswoman Giffords publicly expressed concerns when Sarah Palin, on her website, placed her district in the crosshairs of a rifle and identified her by name below the image as an encouragement to Palin supporters to eliminate her from Congress. In light of all this violence, both actual and threatened, is Arizona a state in which people who are not Republican are able to participate freely and fully in the democratic process? Have right-wing reactionaries, through threats and acts of violence, intimidated people with different points of view for expressing their political positions? So wait a minute. His supporter, someone who worked on his campaign, shoots up Republicans and it's all violence is bad. A Democratic congressperson gets shot and it's right-wing violence. It's the right-wing rhetoric. Is it even safe to be a Democrat? Sarah Palin had a target over that district, as if that was an illusion to shoot this woman. I go on. In fact, I could not find one Democratic politician that expressly blamed left-wing rhetoric and violence. Not one. Couldn't find one after the Scalise shooting. Almost all statements condemned all violence and bad rhetoric. Yet when Trump called out violence on all sides, they said that meant he supported Nazis. So we can assume Democrats in this case are supporting left-wing assassins? Then we had low-level Democrats saying they were glad Scalise was shot. This is from the Federalist. Just 1 week after Steve Scalise was shot by a Bernie Sanders supporter who hated Republicans, a Nebraska Democratic Party official was caught on tape saying that he's glad the congressman who's still fighting for his life was shot. Did you hear any of that from Trump or any Republicans? About the girl that was attacked and killed in Charlottesville? I didn't hear any of that. Where was the media to condemn that? Oh, nowhere. One Republican did call out left-wing violence. And what was the Democratic response to just saying we need to focus on left-wing rhetoric and violence? Here's Nancy Pelosi from a quote from CNN. So this sick individual does something despicable, and it was horrible what he did, hateful. But for them all of a sudden to become sanctimonious as if they never seen such a thing before. And I don't even want to get into the President of the United States, but in terms of the language that he's used. You see? You can't blame, how dare you accuse the left and people like Pelosi of their rhetoric. Now anytime someone on the right commits violence, Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi, they can't wait to blame Trump. It's Trump's fault. Even when you have someone like that guy that shot up the synagogue, who wrote over and over how he hated Trump and thought Trump sold out to the Jews, that still was blamed on Trump. But when you have a left-wing person, one of Bernie's supporters shoot people up, how dare you accuse it of left-wing rhetoric and violence? She felt it was ridiculous to be accused of this. We'll see what she says about Trump's comments today when Democrats are doing the very thing to Trump. And notice how the CNN article blames both sides. Yet for some reason, they feel different today after Charlottesville. Oh, and let's not forget Trump got blamed for the Scalise shooting too. Quote, I do think that both sides are not equally at fault, and there's been a bit of a false equivalency at work, especially in the discussion of the past couple of days. I think that in terms of political leadership right now, that both President Trump and congressional leadership on the Republican side are extremely divisive, and they're really benefiting from a kind of rage machine that operates in this country. That's from former New York Times executive Joe Abrahamson. Get that? Republicans get shot. It's because Republicans' rhetoric. Next quote. What's more harmful, putting millions already in the margins more at risk via draconian policies or shooting a racist lawmaker in the hip? For violent resistance to work, it need to be organized. Individual acts can be understandable, but likely counterproductive and ineffective. That's from June 14 tweets from Huffington Post writer Jesse Benn. Oh, and you saw CNN's comment about Scalise shooter being violence from both sides. Well, check out their page today about 14 crazy things Trump said about Charlottesville. Huh, weird. Just focus on Trump's rhetoric when it's someone that's perceived as a right-wing person hurt someone. But when it's the left, it's, both sides. Trump's violence rhetoric really led to that, too. Don Lemon was especially outraged about Trump's comments today, but had no problem during the Scalise shooting blaming both sides. I could go on and on. Let's not forget that some of the same people on this site that were saying it's one side's rhetoric's fault, Charlottesville is all Trump's fault, they had the exact opposite to say when the Scalise situation happened. Now, for the record, I'm all over this site and others talking about when Steve Scalise got shot. I would not blame Bernie Sanders. I did not blame the left. That's what I was saying. But if you're the type of person, if you're Bernie Sanders, if you're Nancy Pelosi, if you're the Democrats, if you're the media that are going to blame right-wing violence on Trump's rhetoric, then why wouldn't you blame, why did this person shoot up a Republican ball field? Because he believed the rhetoric that was coming from the left, that millions of people were going to die because the Republicans were going to repeal Obamacare. Now, let me go on here. See if I had any more here. Just real quick, let me check. I thought I had more articles about Bernie on here, but you get the point. And this is where Bernie's to blame today. I don't blame him because some guy that happened to work for him that he probably never personally met said some crazy things. I blame him because he's advocating for governmental policies and total control that will allow people like that, maybe not this specific meathead that's been arrested for DUIs and stuff, but people like him and believe like him to get in positions of power and then be able to use this government authority to go after their enemies. Here's more on Bernie, right? Remember, and this is me writing again, remember Bernie thought it was incumbent for everyone to blame the right wing when Gifford got shot? Remember I read that to you at the beginning? Then he chose not to blame the left when Scalise got shot? Well, good old Burns back blaming Trump is horrible and blaming both sides. Bernie is back, and he's criticizing Trump for suggesting both sides are to blame. This is Bernie. In the aftermath of Trump's reportedly unscripted press conference, Sanders tweeted that the president was embarrassing our country and the millions of Americans who fought and died to defeat Nazism. Strange, when his supporters are killing people, all violence needs to be condemned. But when his political opponents have people that received on their side committing violence, he's outraged that you would blame both sides. How about Nancy Pelosi? Remember, she was disgusted that someone would blame the Democrats for not calling out left violence after Scalise shooting. Surely she wouldn't do the same thing here, would she? House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said in a statement that the president had made comments showing what he really believes. The president's continual talk of blame on many sides ignores the abhorrent evil of white supremacism. So when she said, when you had a radical socialist or whatever the Bernie supporter was, shoot up a Republican, and she said, how dare you just blame the left? It's all sides. That was perfectly fine. But when Trump blames both sides, that's proof that he's supporting evil white supremacism. So is it her deflecting and blaming both sides? And Bernie deflecting and blaming both sides? Isn't that defending radical socialists that want to use violence? Like this guy we saw today in this Project Veritas video? That's where Bernie's to blame. It's the ridiculous double standard. What's up, Benny? Thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm missing some of the context of some of the quotes here, but or the comments on the thread, but I'll be watching it more now. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about with Bernie and kind of what was going on. So I didn't see Bernie come out today and condemn this. Look at the double standards, by the way. Remember David Duke once came out and said, yeah, vote for Trump or something like that. And all you heard over and over, do you condemn David Duke? Mr. Trump, do you condemn David Duke? Oh, white supremacists are voting for Trump. Oh, the KKK wants Trump to win. Do you condemn David Duke? Now, never mind a brief aside here. Richard Spencer coming out, you know, Richard Spencer, the Nazi, the white nationalist. He came out and tweeted that he's ashamed that he voted for Trump because he's a Zionist stooge now. All these white supremacists are furious at Trump. Many of them came out and supported people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib when they made their comments. Don't recall the media saying, Rashida Tlaib, Richard Spencer defending you. What do you think about that? Do you remember seeing that coverage? I don't recall seeing that. By the way, you remember when a bunch of members of the Congressional Black Caucus and Barack Obama were taking pictures with Louis Farrakhan? You know, that guy that said that Jews were like termites 2 weeks before the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting? That Louis Farrakhan, noted anti-Semite and racist? But it was cool to pile around. Trump never had pictures with David Duke, but David Duke once said he liked Trump, so that must mean Trump's a Nazi, right? Well, here we have, okay, if that's the treatment, what about this guy? Works on Bernie's campaign. Media questioning him today? Nope. Bernie came out and said he condemned that? Nope. Did the debate ask any questions about it tonight? Nope. Just more of a garbage double standard. And the truth is, you could see with the media's defense of Antifa, or their downplaying of them. Look at Don Lemon saying, oh, you know, there's violence, but they're Antifa. It's in the name, anti-fascist. Look at Chris Cuomo saying, some violence is more justified than others. Look at places like The Guardian that was said, yeah, it's okay to punch a Nazi. We're not going to condemn places like Antifa. These are mainstream people, mainstream publications that are defending using political intimidation and violence because they assume they have good morals in doing it. So a lot of them, what are you going to do? Come out and condemn this guy today? A lot of them do feel this way. So they're going to make it it's just a low-level staffer. I guarantee that the coverage would be different if this was an undercover video, if someone that was working on Trump's campaign making racial comments or saying that, you know, Hillary supporters or Bernie supporters needed to be put in gulags. Guarantee it would be different. Guaranteed. But because they control the narrative, they bury the story, just like always. Or how about this? You want another example of where Bernie's at fault? What's his name? I'm going to butcher the name. Simone Sanders? One of his chiefs of his campaign? You know, the one that was on television laughing at images of a girl, a 16-year-old girl in a MAGA hat getting beat up at school? Oh, cry me a river, white people being beat. Yeah, that racist that's okay with people being beat as long as they're of a certain skin color or a certain affiliation? Bernie knew damn well she made those comments, yet still hired her to a high position in his campaign. Yeah, Bernie could give some of his money to me, right? I mean, here's the problem with the socialists. This is what's so contemptible about them. It's the same thing. And again, people say, oh, you're biased, you're right-wing, you're conservative. Yeah, but when I was growing up, one of the things that I thought that these religious zealots that were like, all they did was preach about the evils of homosexuality and drug use and stuff. Wasn't it satisfying when you would see the type of people, religious preachers that did that, and then they get busted like smoking meth with a male hooker, right? Like, there was a satisfaction in that because it's like, you scumbag. The very thing you accuse others of, you're doing worse than they're doing. It's the same with these garbage establishment Democrats, and particularly the socialists. Every single thing they lecture you about in your morality, they do worse. Every single thing. And Bernie's a prime example of it. Bernie used to talk about the evils of millionaires. Well, now Bernie's a millionaire. So he talks about the evils of billionaires. See, to Bernie, it's immoral to have 1 cent more than him. That's the immorality of it. His money's totally legit. He didn't work with his hands. He didn't dig ditches. He didn't build houses. You know, he wasn't a doctor healing people. He just got paid by the government, and he wrote a book. And people say, he wrote a book and people wanted to buy it. Why doesn't he deserve to be a millionaire? Okay. So did many millionaires. So did many billionaires. They developed some product that people willingly purchased, and they made a lot of money. What's the problem with that? It's just hypocrisy. That's what it is. Bernie wants, you got to have love in your heart and bring in these illegal immigrants. They're not bad people. As he lives in gated communities. Bernie's all for environmentalism. As he flies first class or on private jets. As he drives a sports car. As he has multiple houses. How many houses do you need, Bernie? One of his lake houses will have 5 times more the carbon imprint than my home has. My meager house. He needs multiple, though. Huh, isn't that weird? It's all of them, right? Leo DiCaprio needs to tell you why your light bulbs are ruining the country as he flies around in his private jet doing so. No guns for you as they have armed guards, right? It's over and over. I can handle a smug, wealthy person that's just like, yeah, screw it. I'll do what I want. That person sucks. I'll call them out. But at least they're not pretending to be my moral superior and lecturing me. But that's what these socialists do. They're always prescribing for you a utopia they'll never have the misfortune in living in. Always. I saw Jordan Peterson talk about this once, and I've read part of this book, but I haven't finished it. So there's this book that was written by Orwell. It's called The Road to Wigan Pier. And apparently it came out, I think they called them serials. So the way, like, I like reading Dickens. The way a lot of these novels would come out would be like they'd come out in a local paper or a trade paper or something, and they'd put one chapter at a time out. So he was commissioned to write this by basically socialists in London. And what it is he went to this coal mining place in the UK that was terrible. And the first half of the book is just him talking about the difficulties of being a coal miner back in the day, like the 30s or 20s, whatever he's writing, being a coal miner. And he talked about all kinds of horrors, like, it was like a mile or two walk through the cave to get to work. Everyone was hunchbacked. They all lost their teeth. He talked to one girl that had no teeth, and he's like, what happened to your teeth? And she's like, oh, we pulled them out because they're nothing but misery. They'd have outhouses, like basically one outhouse for every 50 people. You'd have to walk like a mile in the snow to get to the outhouse, and it'd just be horrible, brutal living conditions. And so the socialists would say, see, the workers' rights. And Orwell was for that. But then the second half of the book is basically Orwell saying, I can't help but have this sneaking suspicion that the socialists that are talking about these poor people, they don't really care about the poor people. What they really care about is the rich people. They don't like the poor people. They hate the people that have more than them. And they are able to use the plight of the poor people to attack the wealthy people. So it's not about compassion. It's about greed. It's about jealousy. And I think there's a lot of that in the modern day socialist party. How else do you explain Bernie? His money's okay. That's okay for him. His second lake house is okay. His sports car is okay. His gated community's okay. It's everyone else. They're the problem. They're horrible, immoral people. Bernie's taking every tax credit he can get to pay as little as taxes. You hear all the time these wealthy people say, we need to pay a higher tax rate. No one's stopping them. Do it. It doesn't make you moral if you want to give other people's money away. Give your money away. And then once it's gone, let's say you could live comfortably. I've done it all my life. Now, it's the best I've ever been doing. I make maybe $50,000 a year. Let's say, Bernie, you got more expensive taste than me. You can live $150,000 a year you could live on, right? Your wife also $150,000. $300,000 a year for you and your wife. Sounds reasonable. How about you donate the rest of that money to charity and do something with it? Or you, Zuckerberg, or you, Leo DiCaprio, and insert any of these wealthy people that lecture you on morality. Then, that's very comfortable. $300,000 a year, no problem. I'd love to make it there. Then I'll take you serious when you tell me how I need to spend my money and what I need to do to be moral. Until then, shut your mouth. Because you're exhibiting contempt for people that have more than you, not compassion for the poor. Compassion for the poor isn't you forcing other people to help the poor. It's you of your own goodwill helping the poor. And that's one of the problems I have with a lot of these socialist policy. Tonight you heard about it in the debate. Free childcare, free healthcare, free all this. Having the government take people's money away by force and redistributing to people you like and feel are more deserving of that money doesn't make you a moral person. Government policy cannot legislate morality. If you're truly moral, you'll help those people out of the kindness of your heart. You won't tell me I'm bad for not voting a certain way. You can't fight for a better society if you live and use society. Yeah, that almost makes sense. Sure, I could vote for a better society if I live and use society. So I guess you're saying that no, Bernie Sanders lives and uses. No one who, then within society could ever fight for a better society. Is very, very intelligent there. But that's the problem with socialism, and that's the problem with Bernie. Pure hypocrisy. Yeah, and I mean, Lynn, just real quick before I head out here, I think you're absolutely right. I think that Bernie doesn't have a chance. Because no matter what, Bernie's done his best to be a good little stooge for the DNC. Don't you worry. He's cheered on the intel agencies in their attack of Trump. He cheered on the intel agencies saying that we can't pull out of Syria. He's done his best. But the sad secret is he ain't in the in crowd. And they don't trust him when push comes to shove. And so he'll be written off. Mark my words, he will not be the nominee. And Bernie supporters will be furious. And they'll have only themselves to blame, those that cheered on the intel agencies and the corruption of the media and of the politicians and their smearing of Trump. When that same mechanism is used against them, I'll be there to say I told you so. I'll still fight even though I dislike Bernie. I'll fight against him being cheated if that's what happens. I will. But those that cheered on this treatment of Trump will have no legitimate right to complain. They have reaped what they've sowed. Same with Tulsi Gabbard and her supporters. The same with Jill Stein supporters. All of these people that will eventually be smeared as Russian assets. Hey, you cheered for it. All right, Arms. You keep fighting the good fight. Bernie 2020. I thought, wait. That's weird. Why would you support Bernie? Bernie lives and uses society. So why would you support him in 2020? Oh, you're a kidder, Arms for Dirt. You're pretty good. I like it. But yeah, and that's about all I have for tonight. Now, I'll do some of the things I'm going to be doing videos on in the future are the idea of Burisma now claiming they were hacked by Russians. Like I said, I got to do a story on this, but I thought Dan Bonadino did a great job today about it, which is this seems to be a preemptive strike against the idea once we find out more and more evidence of the corruption of the Bidens comes out. And so now they'll say, oh, this is just... See, Russia hacked Burisma as well, so this is just pushing Russian propaganda. Again, as I've said, the number one effective piece of Russia propaganda by far was the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was sourced by 2 Kremlin officials. That dossier was so impactful that it was used by the FBI, which abused the law and abused their authority 17 times in order to spy on Trump's campaign, a person connected to Trump's campaign, which we know through Bill Binney, formerly of the NSA, and the 2-hop rule, that they can not only spy on anyone that talked to Carter Page, but anyone who talked to Carter Page, which is the 2-hop rule. So they were able to get all communications from the time Carter Page was there in the campaign and possibly more outside of that. And that dossier that we now know was garbage and wasn't true, still a Reuters poll, I think it was Reuters, from after the Mueller report said that upwards of 50% of Democrats still believe Trump was a Russian stooge. He was working on the behalf of Putin. After their hero Mueller discredited that, could find no proof of it. Now we know the IG report says the Steele dossier was garbage. People still believe that. So if it was Russia's goal to spread chaos and cause division in the country, clearly the number one piece of disinformation they had to do so was the Steele dossier, which was sourced by Kremlin agents. That was pushed incessantly by the intel agencies, the Democrats, the media, people in the entertainment industry, people in academia, etc. Bob Mueller, for some reason, said it wasn't within his purview to investigate. He didn't feel the need to investigate the Steele dossier. Didn't talk much about it, did he? Didn't talk about the Kremlin officials that sourced it in his report. The most impactful piece of Russia propaganda. Wasn't that the whole point? Mueller was investigating 2 things. Russian influence into our election and whether or not anyone in Trump's campaign illegally colluded with the Russians. So his number one charge task, the biggest piece of Russian influence, he decided not to look at. The Democrats, the media, all decided to push it, and now they have the nerve. Anytime you question their corruption, they say, oh, that's spreading. You think that Ukraine interfered in the election, even though they publicly admitted it, as I've shown over and over again. Financial Times article in August of 2016, 2 months before the election, shows that Sergei Leshchenko, a parliamentarian in Ukraine, publicly admitting to interfering in the election to help Hillary Clinton, saying that he was doing so and working with people in the anti-corruption agency in the Ukraine and other politicians in the Ukraine. Then we have Artem Sitnik admitting on audio that you could hear that he, yes, interfered in the election to help Hillary. He was the head of the NABU, which was basically the FBI of the Ukraine. All admitted. It's all admitted. Yet the media says it's all hoax and it's all Russian propaganda. Even though, remember what I said earlier? Like Arms for Dirt here, right? You can't believe what they actually say. Oh, how dare you believe that? It's, it's out of context when they say they interfered. It's out of context when this person said supporters should be put in gulags. It's all out of context. Don't believe what they say. Don't believe that. That's Russian propaganda if you're believing it. So the irony, so I think that's what this is more of, them claiming Burisma got hacked by the Russians. So now anytime you talk about Burisma being corrupt or the actions of the Bidens, they'll say, oh, see, well, the Russians took Trump's rhetoric and they hacked Burisma. And that shows this is dangerous to talk about these conspiracy theories. Carter Page FISA warrant wasn't used for any indictments. Who cares? It was used to spy on. Trump's campaign. There was tons of collusion between Russia and Trump. Define collusion. There was none of it that was illegal. There was tons of collusion between the Democrats and Russia as well. For example, they're the only ones that actually paid that got dirt from Kremlin officials. I don't remember the 3-year investigation into that arms for dirt. I'm curious. I'm sure you called for it, though, that Russia collusion that the Democrats had, right? You say Trump got impeached for Burisma and not Biden. That's not true. The articles of impeachment talk about how he was seeking investigations into political rivals, so you're blatantly lying. Trump's Burisma scheme blew up in his face. I don't even know what you're talking about. If you mean that the Democrats have sought to criminalize investigating into their own corruption, then yeah, I guess you're right. They were successful in attempting that. We'll see how far it goes. No, Magnolia, leave arms for dirt here. It's fun to be able to point out all these misconceptions and lies that you hear from the propaganda mainstream media. Trump got impeached for Burisma, not Biden. You're right, Biden. No one even mentioned Biden in the impeachment hearings. It was never mentioned. I remember them talking about Burisma a lot. Oh, wait, no, that's not what they talked. I don't even remember them almost ever talking about Burisma. They talked exclusively about the Bidens. They talked about the company Hunter Biden worked for, but they didn't talk about Burisma. Look up the Kushner-Russia peace plan. Okay, look up the Steele dossier. Talking to Russians isn't a crime as much as you... again, see, they claim McCarthyism. Trump's the McCarthyist, but then it's like, oh, some Trump people talk to some Russians. That must be a crime. No, that's not a crime. It's okay to talk to Russians. The only party that actually got dirt on their opponents from Russians was the Democrats that paid for it. Yet, no investigation into them. And I bet you never called for one, did you, Arms for Dirt? Of course not. Bernie 2020 and 24. Yeah, sure. Arms for Dirt, I think you might be a little out of your league. Yes, there was a meeting with a lawyer named Veselnitskaya that occurred in Trump Tower. Now, Veselnitskaya was a client of Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS was the same company that was paid to get the dirt from the Steele dossier on Trump from Kremlin officials. The head of Fusion GPS, a guy by the name of Glenn Simpson, had dinner the night before and the night after the Trump Tower meeting with that same lawyer, Veselnitskaya. Veselnitskaya was let into the country on a special permit under the Obama administration. So yes, this was set up from the get-go where Don Jr. took a meeting with Veselnitskaya under the assumption that she might have dirt on Hillary. When he found out there was no dirt in Hillary, he left the meeting. Meanwhile, so he didn't get dirt. He was willing to listen to see if there was dirt. He didn't get it. He left. Meanwhile, we know the Democrats sought to pay to get dirt on Trump from Kremlin officials. They did get that dirt from Kremlin officials. They fed that dirt to the FBI and to Obama's DOJ. The FBI then violated their policy 17 times, including straight up fabricating evidence to be able to spy on people connected to Trump's campaign at the behest of that dirt that was paid for by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Yet, strangely, I don't see you complaining about any of that. Manafort shared polling data. Okay. And? What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Okay, is that a crime? Please show me the law where it says, cannot share polling data with a foreign country. I don't recall that law. Meanwhile, no problem with actually paying a foreign spy to get Kremlin officials to actually give dirt on the opponent. Remember, the entire case against Russia collusion for Trump was this. Trump and his team got dirt on Hillary from the Russians. And Hillary's team's going to prove that by paying to get dirt on Trump from the Russians. This is like Hannity. I don't watch him often, but I assume then what? Telling the truth? Making you look bad? I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. Any connection to any... For example, we know now that Bruce Orr, who was in Obama's DOJ, was in connections telling people that they needed to get in touch with Oleg Deripaska, who was a Russian oligarch, because they thought that they might be able to get dirt on Trump for him. We know that the Podesta Group had connections to Deripaska. That was Hillary's campaign manager. Yet we're told over and over again how shady and terrible it was that Manafort had connections to Deripaska. The exact same Russian. We know that Glenn Simpson and all them had connections to the very same Russian lawyer, Veselnitskaya, that apparently was so criminal for Trump Jr. to me. The one-sided nature of this is hilarious. Roger Stone was busted for what? Illegally colluding with Russians? No. I mean, I really do thank you for being here. It gives me so much more to talk about to just point out the propaganda. You say all the right things. Oh, people got arrested. Oh, but Trump people talked to Russians. They shared polling data. People were arrested. It's just right-wing talking points if you disagree with me. You can't handle any of the factual nature of this whatsoever. I noticed you haven't responded once about, say the DNC and Hillary paying the Kremlin for dirt, or paying a foreign spy to get dirt about Trump on the Kremlin. From the Kremlin. Notice you haven't responded to that. Didn't say anything about the Veselnitskaya thing once it was pointed out that she was a client of Glenn Simpson's and was let in by Democrats under the Obama administration. Isn't that weird? Oh, he can insult me all he wants. It doesn't bother me. Arms, by the way, if you would like to come on and talk in person, I'd be happy to have you on at some point. And I'll be polite to you, I will. But I think that you might have some trouble keeping up if the extent of your argument's just going to be this is right-wing talking points. And not only would you look foolish on the Russia thing, I think you really look foolish on the impeachment thing because there's clearly reason to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden. And if there's reason to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden, there's no case for impeachment. So, Trump Tower Moscow equals collusion hotel. It's clever. It means nothing, but good job. So, yeah, that's about all I have for today. Thank you. Honestly, I know you're kind of trolling Arms for Dirt, but thank you for participating. Even if you disagree with me, I don't mind it. And I wouldn't read the chat if I didn't want to respond to it. Thank you, everyone else, for being here. But I will be doing a video on Burisma and everything more with it. Yeah, I will, John. If you get destroyed, I'm more than happy. Maybe you're right. Maybe you'll convince me. I have an open mind. I'd be willing to talk to you. So you didn't have to retract your message, Arms for Dirt, because you had a spelling error. That's no big deal. Yeah, honestly, if you're interested in Arms for Dirt, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you destroy me. So shoot me a text or shoot me a message, and I'll get in touch with you if you'd like to do a live stream in the future. Or if you know someone that you think would be more equipped than you to argue with me in this, I would be willing to talk with them about it as well. So, but thanks everyone for being here. Just a special shout out, just to plug myself. This is the thing I'm the worst at, is plugging myself. My goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to support me, please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe. And if you could recommend me to some other people, I'd really appreciate it. The reason I want to get to 1,000 subscribers is I can't mobile live stream until I have 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to be running for Congress in 2022, and I go to a lot of Republican events in my area. I would like to be able to mobile live stream from them, but until I get 1,000 subscribers, I can't. So there's that way to support me. If you want to make a financial contribution, if you look at the description of this video, it has a link to my PayPal, my Patreon. Right now I have 2 Patreon patrons, which I'm very happy with. At least one of them was in here tonight, so it's very generous of them. So if you have money you'd like to give me, I will be as transparent as possible where that money goes. I'm trying to buy new equipment and things like that. If you don't have money to give me, please, or if you have anywhere better to give it, please don't worry. I'm not going to quit doing videos if I don't get more financial support. I'm not doing it for money. So even if my Patreon supporters would leave and I'd never get a dime, totally fine by me. I do this because I like doing it, and I hope that people enjoy it. As always, I'm humbled that, this was about the most people I've had in a live stream for me for a lengthy amount of time. I'm very humbled that people were willing to listen to me. And I hope, what I'd like to get to people is, regardless if you agree with me or disagree with me, I try to be as honest as possible. If I make mistakes, like Arms for Dirt, despite what you all might think of him in the chat, he was correct to point out I was wrong when I said life expectancy had doubled in 20 years. That wasn't the case. It was actually had gone up by a third in like 50 years. So he was right to point that out. The crux of what I was saying was still true, but I was technically wrong about the numbers. So I do try to be as honest as possible. And that means I'm going to criticize Trump, even though I support him. I'll criticize Republicans if I feel necessary. I try to sympathize with people on the other side as well. So I hope that comes across, even if you disagree with me in some things. One of the things I always say is, if you're truly trying to be a free thinker, there is not one person in the world that is going to agree with you on everything. And because of that, there's certainly not one political party that will agree with you on everything. So even if we have disagreements, I think that reasonable people could disagree. And some of my best friends disagree with me on almost everything politically. So I like having people of all stripes. And I'm really humbled that people choose to listen to me. I hope that you enjoy it and will continue to support me and check out some more stuff I do. What to look for. My work schedule is kind of weird here because we had someone leaving. So I'm going to try to do a live stream Friday, probably around noon. That'll go for at least 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And then I'm going to try to be averaging about at least 5 videos a week, probably trying to do one every weekday. Just a smaller non-live video, like a 6-minute video. The last thing I'll say is, if you or anyone you know, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, want to talk about a topic that you think I know about or maybe that I don't know about and you would like to do a video with me, please get in contact with me via this channel. I can put my email up here as well if it makes it easier for you. And I would love to do videos with people regardless of... I can't guarantee that I'll agree with you, but I think that generally, as you can see from other videos I've done with people that even disagree with me, I think that I'm pretty polite, with the exception of one person, but it got ugly real fast. But I think I'm pretty polite. I'm willing to hear other sides, and I'm willing to talk about any subject. If you would do a video with me, we don't have to use your face. We don't have to use your real name. We could do it live, or we could do it pre-recorded. If you would ever have a problem with anything that you said and think maybe it hurt your future employment, I would take the video down. Though, obviously, if it's live, whoever sees it live, sees it live. But, yeah, I'm trying to facilitate discussions with people that agree or disagree with me. So, if you're interested in anything like that, and look, let me be clear. A lot of people I talk to that I think are some of the smartest people I know, they might not be traditionally book smart, but I come from rural Pennsylvania. The people that I respect the most in life do the things that I can't do. Like, I'm terrible working with my hands. They're like mechanics, carpenters, welders, farmers, truck drivers, things like that. Some of the insight they have is amazing on issues, but they feel like, oh, I don't do that. I can't talk. If you feel that way, you're probably wrong. You probably have something to offer people. So whether you're coming and talking to me, or if you're doing your own channel or something like that, I think that we need more independent people out there trying to do stuff. So, yeah, thanks everyone for joining me, and I had a lot of fun doing this tonight, so look forward to me putting out a video probably tomorrow. So thanks everyone, and have a good one.